Hello, everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Barbara Maybe Abel. There are books and films that help teach ways to confront criminals and appropriate behavior during kidnappings or critical situations. However, reading about these scenarios and actually experiencing them are two different things. Barbara Abel fully realized this when one of the most dangerous criminals in the U.S. showed up at her doorstep. On November 14, 1974, a scared Dale ran to his neighbor's house and began knocking frantically on the door. When the neighbor opened it, he found the boy covered in blood with strange marks on his ankles. Dale explained that the marks were from ropes used by an unknown man who had tied him and his Aunt Beverly while his mother, Barbara, was kidnapped. The neighbor quickly called 911. When the police arrived at the Abel family's home, it looked like a crime scene. There was blood everywhere, and the neighbor noted that Barbara's car was missing, along with her. Dale assisted the detectives by providing details about his mother, 31-year-old Barbara Maybe Abel, who had a twin sister named Beverly, who had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy. The twin sisters shared a deep bond from childhood. Barbara consistently supported and cared for Beverly. As they grew older, their relationship became stronger, with Barbara always striving to improve Beverly's quality of life and help her manage daily challenges. Barbara was smart, cheerful, and serious when necessary. After their father passed away, young Barbara took on many household responsibilities to help her mother. Throughout her life, she maintained a positive outlook and supported her loved ones during tough times. In April 1968, she gave birth to her son, Dale, and felt immense joy as a new mother. However, she soon faced challenges, primarily due to her breakup with the baby's father. Their disagreements had begun about a year before Dale was born. Although they hoped Dale would help resolve their issues, things only got worse. Ultimately, Barbara chose to raise her son as a single mother, later reflecting that this was the right decision for both of them, as it allowed her to create a stable environment for herself and her child. Unfortunately, the family faced a series of challenges. In May 1974, their mother passed away from an illness, leaving them in shock. It felt as if their world had collapsed. Their family had always been very close, so their mother's death deeply affected both Barbara and Beverly. Despite their grief, they tried to maintain a normal environment for the younger generation. Barbara worked diligently, writing and taking a job at a radio station, while Beverly managed household chores. They lived in a modest home in Palm Beach, Florida, and surrounded 6-year-old Dale with love and care, gradually recovering from this tragedy. On November 14, 1974, it seemed like an ordinary day for the Abel family. Beverly assisted Barbara in getting ready for work, and Dale was preparing for school. After dropping Dale off, Barbara went to the radio station where she worked as a news editor. Around noon, she tried to call Beverly, who was at home, but there was no answer. This was strange because Beverly never missed calls. She was always eager to talk, but this time she didn't even call back. Initially, Barbara thought her sister might have fallen asleep and didn't think much of it, so she continued with her work. After leaving the radio station around 5 p.m., she picked up Dale and headed home, expecting to see her sister there. As soon as they entered, she called Beverly, but there was no answer. Barbara asked her son to find his aunt, thinking she might have been listening to music and hadn't heard them come home. While Barbara went to the kitchen, she felt a sudden and intense fear that sent a chill down her spine. It was a deep, instinctual dread, and in that moment, she heard a voice say, "Don't turn around or I'll attack." Just then, her son Dale rushed into the kitchen and said that his aunt was in the bedroom and bleeding. When Barbara turned around, she saw a man pointing a weapon at her and Dale. Staying calm, she told the intruder that she needed to see her twin sister because she was worried about her. This was a risky move, but it seemed to impress the man, who agreed to let her see her sister. With the weapon still aimed at them, Barbara and Dale cautiously walked toward the bedroom, trying to keep Dale away from the armed man. Beverly was in the bedroom, lying on the bed with a gag in her mouth. crying. Barbara kissed her sister and whispered that everything would be all right. Barbara noticed that Beverly was undressed under the blanket. Unable to hold back her feelings, she confronted the attacker, questioning whether he had abused Beverly. He responded with laughter, claiming he had attempted to assault Beverly but had failed. His cruel smile and taunting words sent another chill down Barbara's spine. Following this, she tried to bribe the assailant. She revealed that she had a significant amount of money at home and was willing to give him her car keys. In return, she pleaded with him to leave them alone and not to harm them. The stranger, however, expressed his desire to take her child and reach for the boy. Barbara firmly declared that she would never give up her son and instead offered to take Dale's place. The man agreed. The assailant identified himself as Paul John Knowles and claimed he had just escaped from prison, stating he had no plans to return. He warned Barbara that he wouldn't harm her as long as she followed his orders exactly. Although Barbara knew he was lying and likely wouldn't let her go easily, she felt she had no good options left. Her primary concern was the safety of her son and her injured sister, who needed help. However, Paul was determined to keep them as hostages to buy time for his escape. He tightly bound Dale's and Beverly's hands and feet on the bed. Barbara was horrified at the thought of leaving her loved ones in such a vulnerable state, but she realized that any resistance could endanger their lives. Throughout this terrifying situation, she remained calm, speaking to her family as if everything was normal, reassuring them that it would all be over soon and that they would be all right. This approach worked. She managed to soothe her child and keep the kidnapper from becoming agitated. Barbara emphasized that they should not provoke Paul, as she had no way of knowing his true intentions. Her goal was to lead the attacker far away from her home and loved ones, then find a way to escape and alert the authorities. Paul accepted the offered money and car keys. He pointed the weapon at Barbara, then got into the car and drove away. Throughout this time, Barbara was primarily concerned about her family. More than 30 minutes later, Dale escaped and sought help. The police responded to the call. They found an abandoned car near the house, which was the vehicle used by the kidnapper. The car was registered in one state, but its license plate had been stolen from another location. Investigations revealed that the car had been stolen from a man named William Bates a couple of months earlier. Eventually, William's body was discovered, strangled, in Ohio. Inside the car's glove compartment, detectives discovered numerous credit cards and insurance policies, the majority of which belonged to Carswell Carr. The man had become a victim of a double homicide along with his 15-year-old daughter, Amanda, just days before Barbara's kidnapping. The tragedy at the Carr home in Milledgeville, Georgia, was one of the most horrifying scenes the investigators had ever witnessed. A 15-year-old girl had been brutally strangled, and her father had suffered around 30 stab wounds. It was evident that the perpetrator was a dangerous individual, prepared to kill anyone who interfered. On November 6, 1974, the Carr home, located almost 7 kilometers from where Barbara lived, was found ransacked. Inside the car, discovered near the home of Barbara, a will belonging to a man named Paul John Knowles was also found. Once law enforcement checked their database, they identified Paul as an escaped serial killer. Authorities linked him to at least 35 murders across the United States. He traveled aimlessly, leaving behind trails of blood and bodies, completely indifferent to the consequences of his actions. He selected his victims randomly, unlike most psychopaths, who usually target a specific type. He took lives with the same pleasure, whether the victim was a child or an adult. He left behind a lot of evidence, but there were no hints about his next actions. Meanwhile, Barbara and Paul were driving Barbara's car when he discovered he was wanted by the police. He forced Barbara to change the radio station. She complied and noticed that he seemed to expect the news to be on all channels, while others remained quiet, which frustrated him. At that moment, she was still unaware of his true nature. Suddenly, he confessed to having killed several people. This made Barbara uncomfortable, so she tried to change the topic to distract him from his violent past by discussing the weather, movies, or anything unrelated. Despite her attempts, he continued to casually mention his killings. Barbara began to act flirtatiously, realizing that her femininity might be her only chance for escape. Barbara decided to try to win him over. She called him sweet and offered him a cigarette. When Paul asked why she was being so nice, Barbara replied that she didn't believe he was a bad person, and even said he reminded her of the famous actor Robert Redford. This seemed to work. After the comparison, Paul became much more responsive, calm, and easier to talk to. They continued their conversation as if nothing bad had happened, as if they were simply on a date. Paul asked Barbara what she did for a living. She replied that she was a news editor on the radio and dreamed of writing a book. This excited Paul, who seemed genuinely interested in her ambitions, especially the idea that she could write a book about him. He expressed a desire to become famous, mentioning that he wanted the book's proceeds to go to his mother, but he didn't specify how he planned to achieve that fame. He repeatedly claimed to have killed many times. Although she was terrified, Barbara tried to hide her fear and remain calm. At one point, she realized that her only chance to escape was to push Paul out of the moving car, but she couldn't summon the strength or courage to do it. Barbara understood that if the investigators discovered who she was with, they would likely conclude that she was already dead. Paul was a ruthless predator with an insatiable thirst for killing. He was unpredictable and armed, which made him extremely dangerous. The most frightening aspect was that they were in an unknown location, and she had no idea where Paul was taking her. The detectives discovered that he was traveling between different states, often switching cars, and that his attacks consistently resulted in death. Occasionally, he took hostages, all of whom ended up dead. The chances of Barbara surviving her abduction were deemed very slim, but her family and friends refused to give up hope. They believed she could still be found alive. Law enforcement officials realized they had to act quickly because with every minute that passed, the likelihood of rescuing Barbara decreased. A search perimeter was set up on the roads in West Palm Beach, along with checkpoints. Authorities announced plans to intercept the suspect, Paul, focusing on Barbara's distinctive golden vehicle. However, detectives were unaware that they were too late. Paul had already taken Barbara beyond the checkpoints. Paul arrived with Barbara at a motel in Fort Pierce, about 100 kilometers from the scene of the abduction. He intended to rest there for the night and had no plans to release Barbara. To avoid suspicion, they registered as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, pretending to be on their honeymoon. Barbara felt that the hotel receptionist was suspicious of them based on her gaze. Meanwhile, she knew that Paul was carrying a weapon at his waist. To allay the receptionist's suspicions, Barbara embraced Paul and acted like a loving wife. This successfully convinced the administrator, who then handed them the key to the room. As soon as they entered the room, Paul ordered Barbara to take off her clothes. Barbara felt scared and protested, saying she was too tired, but Paul ignored her and insisted she comply. While the criminal was trying to do his dirty deed, she thought of everything that came to mind about her son and sister in order to detach herself from what was happening, but at first, she couldn't manage it. Paul grew frustrated and angry, becoming aggressive toward her. Sensing his loss of control, Barbara calmly asked him what he was trying to accomplish, which helped ease his anger momentarily. However, he later abused her. At one point, he shared with her that he had two personalities, referring to them as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, explaining his frequent mood changes. Barbara found it hard to predict his rapid shifts in temperament. After a brief period of calm, Paul suddenly ripped the bed sheets, tied Barbara up with them, and threw her onto the bed before turning on the television. Exhausted both mentally and physically, she eventually fell asleep. In her dreams, Barbara saw her deceased mother, who reassured her that everything would be fine. At that moment, Barbara understood it was a sign and resolved to do whatever it took to save herself. While she slept, she heard news reports and saw Paul intently watching a broadcast that displayed her photographs alongside those of Paul, his identity had already been established. They also reported on other crimes committed by Paul that were known at that time. Barbara was horrified. She understood that her chances of rescue were extremely low. Meanwhile, Paul reveled in the attention he was receiving from the media. Barbara recognized that he desperately wanted to become famous. Later, Paul went to sleep, tying his leg to Barbara's to prevent her from escaping. By November 15, the police still had no leads on her whereabouts. The search for Paul had escalated to a national scale. Headlines in all newspapers and on television shouted that the most dangerous criminal in the country was killing again. Barbara woke up in the morning next to Paul. She had barely slept the entire night, terrified to be tied to one of America's most wanted criminals. Paul took her to the nearest diner for breakfast. While he eagerly devoured scrambled eggs, toast, pancakes, and orange juice, Barbara couldn't eat anything. She glanced around nervously, hoping someone would recognize her, while also looking for ways to escape. However, she quickly noticed that Paul's weapon was aimed at her. He warned her not to make any sudden movements. To her dismay, she realized that no one seemed to recognize them, despite the extensive news coverage and radio alerts. Barbara understood that she couldn't rely on anyone for help. She was too scared to scream or ask for assistance, fearing it would only worsen her situation. She decided to keep playing her role, believing it would save her life. She buried her face in the plate and had a small breakfast. Afterward, Paul and Barbara returned to the motel, where he abused her again. Initially, she fought back, which only fueled his anger. At one point, Barbara feared for her life, believing he might not stop in his rage. However, she managed to save herself once more by employing her understanding and psychological tactics. She stayed calm, engaged him in conversation, and successfully avoided a violent outcome for the second time. During their dialogue, Paul mentioned that he wanted to get to know Barbara before everything changed, clearly referring to his criminal actions. Thus, she realized that she had found a way to connect with him, and her chances of a positive outcome immediately increased. Later, Paul tied her to the bed again and stepped out to make a phone call. Barbara struggled to free herself, but was unsuccessful. Then she noticed a key on the nightstand. It appeared that Paul had hastily closed the door and locked it. Oddly, it seemed as if he had done this intentionally, perhaps to protect her from himself. A few minutes later, he began banging on the door from the outside. Barbara waited in silence, her heart racing. Through the door, he told her that he knew she couldn't speak because of the gag in her mouth. He urged her not to tell the police that Paul had hurt her, claiming he never meant to harm her and was sorry for what had happened. His final words were, "I love you, and I'm leaving." After that, the sounds outside faded away. He had truly left. At first, Barbara was too scared to move. She didn't scream or call for help, fearing he was still outside, waiting for a reason to hurt her. She wondered if he had said those things to test her, as if she needed to prove something. However, she also realized that if she waited too long, he might change his mind, and she would miss her chance to escape. Finally, Barbara managed to free herself using the sharp edge of a piece of glass from the nightstand. She quickly called the front desk, telling them that a serial killer had kidnapped her, then hung up. The administrator alerted the police and requested assistance. A few minutes later, police officers opened the door. After her release, Barbara immediately called Beverly to hear the voices of both her sister and her son. They were overjoyed that she had managed to escape. However, despite the happy reunion, Barbara was still troubled by the fact that Paul was still at large and could return to harm her. Her nightmare could not truly end as long as he remained free. Fortunately, she did not suffer serious physical injuries during her kidnapping, but the psychological effects left her deeply affected. Barbara experienced post-traumatic stress disorder for a long time. She credited her faith in God for helping her family heal and chose to forgive Paul in order to find peace moving forward. By November 17, law enforcement had learned that a patrol officer, Charles Campbell, was missing and suspected he might have been abducted by Paul. The officer had attempted to stop a vehicle and approached the driver's window, but he was too late and saw a weapon aimed at Charles. Paul kidnapped Charles and took the patrol car, leaving behind Barbara's car. Shortly after, the police vehicle was found abandoned on the roadside while Paul was trying to stop another driver, James Mayer. Now, Paul had two hostages, whom he later transferred to another vehicle after killing the driver. About 100 kilometers into Georgia, a gas station employee noticed a man in uniform acting strangely in the back seat of one of the vehicles that had pulled in. He promptly alerted emergency services. After the vehicle left, the employee reported his observations, which helped law enforcement identify the car and its location. They initiated a chase and managed to intercept the vehicle. However, Paul refused to stop, even with flat tires. Driving on flat tires didn't last long. He lost control and crashed into a barrier. Paul abandoned the vehicle and fled into the woods. The police chased him closely, and explosions were heard from the forest. Despite this, Paul managed to escape again. The following day, a hunter saw Paul in the woods. He noticed that Paul was injured and reported the sighting to the authorities. Eventually, Paul was captured and refused to reveal the location of Charles and James, the driver of a stolen car. On December 18, about a month after their abduction, they were found tied to a tree in Georgia, both dead from wounds inflicted by a weapon. News of Paul, the most dangerous serial killer, spread on television, bringing relief to Barbara and her family. She had spent over a day in captivity and fully realized the threat the detectives were facing. Barbara remembered that he had escaped from prison before and feared it could happen again, leaving her and her family feeling unsafe for a while. They moved in with relatives, but this offered little comfort to Barbara. Barbara understood that she could only find peace if Paul could never harm anyone again. During this time, she faced significant psychological struggles. On the way to prison, Paul had a devious plan in mind. He was placed in the sheriff's car, and they drove to the location. The driver and accompanying officer were unaware that Paul had a paperclip with him. During the drive, Paul waited for a moment when the officers were distracted and managed to pick the lock on his handcuffs. A struggle broke out, and he seized the officer's weapon. Fortunately, the sheriff reacted quickly. He attacked Paul, emptying his entire magazine, realizing that both were in mortal danger and only decisive action could save their lives. Paul had died. This news brought immense relief to Barbara, her family, and many others who had been anxiously following the villain's actions across the country. Finally, he could no longer pose a threat, allowing everyone to breathe a sigh of relief. After much contemplation, Barbara ultimately decided to stay in her home instead of moving. Although she was going through a difficult time, the house held memories of her mother and the joyful moments of her childhood. Among these memories was her miraculous escape from one of the most dangerous serial killers in the U.S. during the 1970s. As she worked to heal from her trauma, Barbara married Jim Abel. Despite the challenges she faced, including surviving cancer, she raised Dale. Motivated by her experiences and perhaps Paul's quest for notoriety, Barbara wrote a book detailing her abduction from her own perspective. She vividly described the horrors she faced with the killer and focused on the strategies she used to escape the fate that befell many of his victims. Sadly, her sister Beverly, who passed away from cancer in 2019, never had the chance to read Barbara's book, published in 2021, but Beverly was involved in the early stages of its creation and supported her sister throughout the process. As it turned out, besides Barbara, there was another survivor named Sandy Fox, who was also a writer. There is a theory that Paul intentionally left these two women alive so they could write books about him and make him famous. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jennifer Faith. Jamie and Jennifer Faith were a happy and cheerful couple at the time they met. Jennifer had an 8-year-old daughter named Amber from her first marriage in 2012. Jamie and Jennifer married, and when Amber turned 18, Jamie adopted her. The three lived in Arizona until 2017, when Jamie was promoted, and they moved to Dallas. Jamie worked as a manager at American Airlines, while Jennifer, who had a medical degree, worked as a manager at a hospital. On October 9, 2020, an event occurred that forever changed their seemingly happy lives. At 7:30 a.m., Jamie and Jennifer, as usual, took their dog Maggie for a morning walk. A security camera near the front door recorded them leaving. Just a few seconds later, an explosion rang out. An unknown man wearing a blue mask attacked Jamie with a gun. Jamie fell to the ground and died on the spot. The attacker then approached Jennifer, tied her hands with duct tape, and tried to steal her jewelry. Unsuccessful. He jumped into a nearby car and fled the scene. Jennifer was largely uninjured. Her neighbor, Melinda, heard the explosion outside and quickly called 911 to report the situation. When the police arrived, they interviewed Jennifer. She gave a description of the attacker and mentioned that the family had 3 dogs and that they walked them 3 to 4 times a day. The police began canvassing the neighborhood, speaking to residents for potential witnesses. People who knew Jamie Faith described him as a cheerful and kind person, saying he had no enemies. Jennifer's 2 neighbors, Shimona Jackson and his wife, Melissa Gonzalez, said they had known Jennifer's family for years. They maintained good communication and friendship, often inviting each other over to visit. Jennifer even let her neighbors use their backyard pool when she wasn't home. Neighbors described Jennifer as having a great sense of humor, noting that they never heard her swear or raise her voice. They also observed that Jamie and Jennifer had a loving relationship and rarely argued. A neighbor shared a surveillance video that captured a man wearing a blue mask just before he began attacking Jamie. Other cameras captured the suspect fleeing from a vehicle identified as a black Nissan Titan pickup, although the camera failed to record the license plate. The police did notice a key detail. There was a white letter T on the rear driver's side window. This provided the police with a valuable lead after her husband's death. Jennifer received an outpouring of sympathy, with even strangers offering to help. A local women's club, supported by the church, has been providing free meals for Jennifer and her daughter for weeks. Jennifer requested vegan meals. A fundraising page was set up on a charity website to seek financial help for Jennifer and her children during this difficult time. In a short period, she raised about $60. Jennifer organized 2 funerals for her husband, one in Dallas and one in Phoenix, in December 2020, 2 months after her husband's death. She gave a brief interview to a local television station, overwhelmed with grief. Jennifer urged the police and the public to find the person responsible for her husband's death. She expressed hope that the perpetrator would eventually understand the severity of their actions and come forward. The police are actively investigating the case. Examining Jennifer's background and her cell phone, they found a text message from April 2020. 6 months before the tragedy, in which Jennifer told a friend that she was rekindling her relationship with her ex-boyfriend, Darren. The police also discovered a contact number for Darren Lopez on Jennifer's phone. It was clear that Jennifer and Darren had known each other since high school and had started dating again in early 2020. Darren, 49, is a retired veteran who suffered a traumatic brain injury while serving in Iraq and is currently receiving disability benefits. He also struggles with post-traumatic stress disorder, which leads to frequent bouts of anger. Since 2015, Darren has lived in Tennessee with his wife and 3 daughters. In December 2019, his wife filed for divorce, leaving Darren feeling depressed. He was struggling financially, dealing with multiple loans and debts, and worried about losing his home in the impending divorce. To cope, Darren began reconnecting with old friends on social media. One of the first people he contacted was Jennifer Faith, an old girlfriend from high school and college. In 2020, they rekindled their romance through correspondence. Police discovered that Darren owned a 20-acre lot in Tennessee and a black Nissan Titan pickup truck, which matched the vehicle used by the suspect who fled the crime scene. Dallas police shared this information with the Tennessee police, who then set up aerial surveillance of Darren's home. they spotted a black Nissan Titan pickup truck with a white T sticker on the rear driver's side window. Police did not immediately arrest or question Darren. Instead, they continued to monitor him to gather more information. They checked his background, financial records, transactions, and phone logs. Police discovered that Darren had been in frequent contact with Jennifer, sometimes sending as many as 500 text messages a day. However, starting around noon on October 8, the day before Jamie died, Jennifer stopped all contact for about 28 hours. During this time, Darren told his daughters that he was leaving town to go hunting for a few days. Bank card records show that he went to a gas station near his home before heading to Jennifer's house. Surveillance cameras captured Darren at a convenience store and gas station on his way to Jennifer's house. Footage from a gas station in Arkansas showed him wearing a blue mask. The next day, at 2 a.m., GPS data indicated that Darren went to Jennifer's house. He was also seen on surveillance cameras at a vacant house next door, where he stayed for about 5 hours until 7:30 a.m., when Jamie went out to walk her dog and was murdered. After the incident, he drove back to Tennessee on January 11, 2021, 3 months after the murder. Darren was arrested while walking his dog near his home. He appeared nervous and denied any involvement in Jamie Faith's death. However, police found a blue mask in his pickup truck. He was taken to a local jail, and during a search of his home, officers discovered a .45 caliber handgun, which was the weapon used to kill Faith. They also found Jennifer's credit card. Darren Lopez was charged with the murder of Jamie Faith and was transferred to the Dallas County Jail. Police decided to check on Jennifer, who was unaware that Darren had been arrested. During questioning, Jennifer denied having a romantic relationship with Darren, but admitted that they communicated daily. Over the past 6 months, they had exchanged approximately 116 text messages, indicating that they communicated almost constantly. To keep their interactions secret from her husband, Jennifer deleted all text messages and calls from her phone, but some messages remained. Their conversations covered a wide range of topics. Police soon discovered that Jennifer had sent Darren a text message asking him to remove the T sticker from the back window of his pickup truck. Darren later responded he had removed it 2 months after Jamie's death. Jennifer informed Darren that she had not received the $629 life insurance payout for Jamie. She explained to Darren that they had not yet reviewed her claim because the police had said she was a suspect. Jennifer then called the police to express her frustration at not being informed about the investigation and for not being removed from the suspect list. Meanwhile, she continued to communicate with Darren and began supporting him financially by sending him money and expensive gifts. After her husband's death, Jennifer also created a profile on a charity website seeking financial support for herself and her daughter. She raised $60 and spent it all within 2 months. Police tracked her finances and discovered that she had wired money to Darren, paid for his plane tickets, and allowed him to use her credit cards. Jennifer did her best to support Darren even after his arrest. She continued to express her love for him and pledged to always be there for him, no matter the circumstances. On February 24, 2021, Jennifer was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice in connection with her husband Jamie Faith's case. She was taken to the Dallas County Jail, where she pleaded not guilty. At this point, she was no longer able to interfere with the investigation or delete messages from her devices. Police searched Jennifer's home and seized her computer, where they discovered a series of emails sent from Jamie's account. The emails contained detailed accounts of Jamie abusing Jennifer. Some of these messages included photos showing her bruises and injuries. However, what surprised the police was that these emails continued to be sent to Darren. Police soon discovered that these emails were part of a carefully planned plot. Jennifer had created fake emails to make people think that she was being abused by her husband. She sent these messages to Darren to convince him of her plight. She also fabricated another email that appeared to be from a friend who claimed to know about Jennifer's abuse and urged Darren to help her. upon learning of these emails. Darren decided to rescue Jennifer in September 2021, 7 months after her arrest. Jennifer was charged in connection with the death of her husband Jamie and faced the death penalty. What made Jennifer want her husband dead? On the surface, she seemed to have the perfect life, a loving husband who provided financial security and a comfortable home for her. On February 7, 2022, Jennifer Faith appeared in court and admitted to deceiving Darren Lopez by sending him emails from her late husband's account to manipulate him. In exchange for Jennifer's guilty plea, prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty for her. Jamie's relatives did not attend the hearing, the family home was sold, and daughter Amber, along with the dog Maggie, moved out of Texas. Amber maintained contact with her mother, calling her twice a week. After Jennifer's confession, Darren forwarded and admitted that he was the one who killed Jennifer's husband, Jamie. He explained that he had a good family, but after returning from Iraq, he began communicating with Jennifer, which ultimately led to the tragic incident. Jennifer and Darren dated in high school, but broke up. They rekindled their romance in 2020. Communicating mostly over the phone without ever meeting in person, Darren revealed that the decision to deal with Jamie was actually Jennifer's idea, and he felt manipulated by her. On June 21, 2022, Jennifer Faith was convicted of murdering Jamie Faith and sentenced to life in prison. She was also ordered to pay $6.5 for Jamie's funeral expenses and a $250 fine. Meanwhile, the fundraising campaign to support Jennifer Faith's family returned all of the money to the original donors. Darren Lopez confessed to killing Jamie Faith. He was convicted at trial and sentenced to 62 years in prison. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Victoria Salas. This story takes place in Mexico. Victoria Salas was born on August 31, 1994, known as Pam to her close friends. She was the second child in her family, with an older sister and a younger brother. Their parents, Salvador San Pedro and Consuelo Martinez Salas, were humble and hard-working individuals who aimed to instill strong values in their children and encourage a love of work. The family lived in Mexico City, in a house that belonged to Victoria's grandmother, who had serious health issues. She took care of her grandmother and followed doctor's advice to protect her from stress. In 2017, she worked at a marketing company and dreamed of buying a new house for her family. Although she wanted to study tourism, she had to leave high school to help support her family, which struggled financially at that time. Her mother is a housewife, and her father worked at a gas station. Victoria enjoyed dressing well. She wore bright dresses, applied striking makeup, dyed her hair, and often wore high heels. Like many young people, she loved spending time with friends and enjoying life. In 2015, during one of her walks, Victoria met a young man named Mario Sáenz, 27 years old. After their initial meeting, they began spending more time together. Mario was 6 years older than Victoria. He had a 10-year-old son from a previous relationship. Mario followed his passion for skateboarding and turned it into a career. He started skateboarding at a young age and quickly became the best in Mexico City, eventually ranking among the top 5 in the country. His success in prestigious international competitions attracted sponsors and helped popularize skateboarding in Mexico. He also opened themed stores in Mexico City. As a prominent figure in the sports industry, Mario gained a significant following on social media. He aimed to compete in the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo, but unforeseen circumstances prevented him from doing so. Mario and Victoria continued to see each other. By early 2017, their relationship had become more stable. Victoria often stayed with Mario and spent a lot of time with his son. However, like many relationships, they experienced ups and downs. Friends of them noted that Mario was very jealous and tried to control Victoria in various aspects of her life. This led to several breakups, but they always reconciled. On August 31, 2017, her 23rd birthday, her mother woke her up at 7 a.m. to ensure she could enjoy the morning after getting ready with makeup, a beautiful dress, and new shoes. Victoria went to work. Throughout the day, she texted her mother, sharing that she had received 2 chocolate cakes as gifts. Victoria promised her mother they would eat the cakes together when she got home, however. Later in the evening, she informed her mother that she would be arriving late because she was celebrating her birthday with Mario. The next morning, her mother, Consuelo, reached out to Victoria and learned that she hadn't gone to work yet. Victoria explained that she had taken a day off from work and with Mario had gone to Morelos during the day. Victoria received a call from her father, Salvador, who wanted to know when she would return home and where she was. Victoria repeated the same information she had given her mother, assuring her father that she would be home in a few hours after several of waiting. Victoria still had not returned home, and her family was growing increasingly anxious. As time passed, their worry intensified. Their attempts to reach her by phone failed. By Saturday, Victoria was not coming home. Consuelo felt a deep unease, yet she tried to keep calm, imagining that any moment she would hear footsteps and see her daughter walk in. By Saturday evening, the family's questions and concerns multiplied as they gathered by the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of her familiar figure. Around 8 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Unfortunately, it was the police. Consuelo immediately started asking them questions. Desperate to understand why they were there, the police provided a vague response. Leaving, she disappointed and anxious. They informed her that they couldn't share details at that moment and requested that she accompany them to the prosecutor's office in Tlalpan. On the way to the prosecutor's office, the police asked Consuelo several questions, including whether she knew a young man named Mario. When she confirmed that she knew him, they inquired about his possible whereabouts. They arrived at the prosecutor's office around 10 p.m. Initially, Consuelo was informed that her daughter was accused of stealing face cream, but they soon realized this information was incorrect. Another girl with the same name as her daughter had been detained for theft at the same facility. Later, Consuelo received distressing news. Her daughter, Victoria, had been killed. This revelation shocked her deeply, her unable to comprehend what had happened. At that point, the police had already formed a preliminary theory based on their investigation. They believed that Mario was the last person to see Victoria alive, making him the primary suspect in the case, according to police information about the final hours of the victim's life. Events unfolded on Friday evening. A group of young people returning from Morelos stopped at the Novo Coapa Hotel in a busy area and rented Villa number 20. After arriving, they ordered food and drinks for dinner. Shortly after, they contacted the hotel administrator to report issues with the Wi-Fi. A hotel employee came to the villa to resolve the internet problem. The next call to the reception happened at 5:30 a.m. on Saturday. At that time, a young man named Mario approached the front desk and stated that he was checking out of the villa, but that his girlfriend would remain there for a while when it was time for checkout. The cleaning lady went to Villa number 20 to perform her duties. She knocked on the door, but there was no response. She then used her key to enter the villa and was shocked to find the interior stained with blood. In the bathroom, she discovered Victoria's lifeless body. The body was found in the bathtub, with hot water overflowing onto the floor. After some time, the hotel administrator contacted the police. Forensic experts discovered that Victoria had suffered multiple blows, leaving various injuries on her body. They also found severe burns on her skin, caused by prolonged exposure to hot water. The cause of death was identified as a deep laceration on her throat. On September 3rd, the day after the tragic news, Victoria's relatives held a wake at the Chapel of the Divine Infantina in Tolgan. They shared their emotions and memories with one another. Mario, the prime suspect in Victoria's murder, also attended the wake. To their shock, his presence angered the family. As they were aware of his role in the case, Mario claimed he came to express his condolences and to present documents that he believed would clear him of suspicion. into Mario's presence. Victoria's relatives called the police, officers arrived, and detained Mario, taking him to the prosecutor's office on September 4. During a press conference dedicated to this case, the prosecutor of Mexico City called the murder of Victoria a femicide. The prosecutor also stated that the suspect in the murder was already giving his testimony to the prosecutor's office on September 6. Mario was unexpectedly released from custody after evidence proved he was in a different location on the night of the murder. He had a document from government agencies that verified his alibi, stating he had an accident to hitting a pothole on that night. Mario explained that he promptly reported the accident to his insurance company and filed a complaint with the prosecutor's office, seeking compensation from the city for the damages. He also mentioned being with friends that night, who could testify on his behalf, despite claiming his innocence. Mario quickly tried to leave the country after his release. A month has passed since Victoria's murder, and her parents have continued to demand justice from the authorities, realizing that they will face a long and difficult journey to find accountability. They encountered numerous obstacles that complicated the process. The delays in the case were due to several factors, including an earthquake that struck Mexico City, particularly affecting the regions of Ebla and Morelos on September 19, 2017. Consequently, in October 2017, Judge of the Mexico City High Court issued an arrest warrant for Mario. The judge stated that Mario's alibi could not be verified and that the evidence collected by the police indicated he was the murder victim. The judge noted that the surveillance camera in the transport service did not capture any footage of Mario, who had allegedly filed a complaint at the time of the murder soon after. Mexican authorities announced that Mario had been placed on the international wanted list, and a notice was sent to Interpol. They feared that he might attempt to flee the country, or may have already done so, according to the prosecutor's information. There were multiple witness statements against Mario. Along with other evidence, forensic experts discovered tissue samples from Victoria's nails that matched Mario's DNA. Additionally, a surveillance camera at the hotel where the incident occurred recorded an individual resembling Mario entering and exiting the premises. However, the hotel's security staff could not provide the requested video footage. Citing a malfunction in their video surveillance system, detectives interviewed Victoria's relatives and friends, concluding that Mario's excessive jealousy was the primary factor in the murder. Analysis of the victim's mobile phone supported this conclusion. By then, the case was widely reported in the media, leading to a divided public opinion. Some believed in Mario's innocence, while others thought he was guilty. Mario's supporters launched a social media campaign to back him, which included efforts to discredit Victoria and her lifestyle. As part of this campaign, they portrayed Victoria as a troubled girl suffering from depression who abused alcohol and banned substance. Meanwhile, Victoria's family, supported by various women's organizations, defended her reputation by countering the false claims made by Mario's supporters. They cited official documents, including the autopsy report, which showed no traces of illegal substances in Victoria's body or blood. Additionally, the victim's relatives filed a complaint with the capital's prosecutor's office, challenging the decision to keep the suspect free. Their efforts not end there. On December 15, 2017, the victim's family, supported by several feminist organizations, held a rally outside the general prosecutor's office in Mexico City. They called on authorities to arrest the person responsible for Victoria's death. On the same day, the family, along with the National Observatory to Combat Femicide, asked the authorities to hand over the case. At that time, the observatory had classified Victoria's case as simple murder. Consuelo approached prosecutor Edmundo Porfiri during a personal meeting. She highlighted that nearly 5 months had passed since her daughter's death, yet there had been little progress in the investigation. In response, the prosecutor agreed to forward the case to a special agency focused on investigating crimes against women. They also agreed to form a working group that would include all stakeholders. Allowing for daily oversight of the investigation's progress, one of the consulate's main requests was to accelerate efforts to apprehend the individual responsible for the crimes on March 30, 2019, nearly 19 months after Victoria's death. Mario was arrested. He voluntarily went to the prosecutor's office with his lawyer before turning himself in. Mario released a video from a moving car, stating his intention to surrender. In the video, he maintained his innocence and criticized the prosecutor's office for allegedly fabricating charges against him. The preliminary hearing took place on March 31, 2019. The prosecution accused Mario of inflicting bodily harm on Victoria, on stabbing her in the neck, which resulted in her death. In contrast, Mario's defense argued that no fingerprints had been found in the hotel room where the murder occurred, suggesting there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime scene. After review, the judge informally decided to place Mario in custody on April 4, 2019. A hearing was held regarding the murder of Victoria. Her parents, along with family members, attended the session at the Supreme Court. After a 12-hour trial, Mario was charged, and the judge ordered a 2-month delay in sentencing until the investigation was complete. The victim's family experienced a mix of emotions and think that, now, justice would be served, while it cannot bring Victoria come back. This progress in the case represents a significant step forward for her family. The final hearing took place at the Mexico City Criminal Justice Center. Mario has not pleaded guilty. In her statement, Consuelo urged the court to deliver justice and hold Mario accountable for his actions. Mario Sáenz was finally convicted of murdering Victoria Salas under the Mexican Penal Code. A murder motivated by hatred carries a sentence of up to 70 years in prison. In this case, the judges sentenced Mario to 45 years in prison and ordered him to pay the victim's family 485,000 pesos, equivalent to about $23,000, after the verdict was announced. The media reported statements from both Victoria's mother and Mario's mother, who had opposing views on the case. Victoria's mother expressed relief that her daughter could finally rest in peace, feeling satisfied that Mario would be held accountable. In contrast, Mario's mother argued that her son was wrongly convicted of a crime he did not commit. She emphasized her determination to prove his innocence and informed the media that she was preparing to appeal the verdict. Mario's account on an entertainment channel posted a statement claiming that he was convicted of a crime he did not commit, despite the absence of his DNA at the scene of the crime. After the passage of time, Mario's defense was able to appeal the court's decision, but on December 1, 2022, the sentence of 45 years in prison was reinstated. This is thanks to each of Victoria's family members. They to wage fight for justice, trying to cope with the loss and the emptiness that forever settled in their hearts. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jennifer Harris. Jennifer Harris grew up in the small town of Bonham, Texas, throughout her school years. Jennifer was popular with boys. In the 6th grade, she met a young man named Rob Holman. They started out as friends, but as they grew older, they realized that their relationship was deeper than friendship. They became inseparable, and Rob became a beloved member of Jennifer's family. Jennifer had big dreams and wanted to move to a bigger city to pursue them. After graduating from high school, she moved to another city to attend college, and Rob moved in with her a few years later. In 1996, they got married. A year after the wedding, Jennifer's family faced a huge loss. When her mother died of cancer, Rob and Jennifer bought a house in the suburbs of Dallas. But their relationship deteriorated. They began to argue more often. Jennifer was always striving for a better life, while Rob was content with his quiet lifestyle in a small town and did not want to change. Jennifer longed for new opportunities in a big city, so she decided to enroll in a massage school. At the massage school, Jennifer met people with new ideas, and together they planned to open a wellness massage center. One of her new friends was James Hamilton, who lived with his wife and children, although still married to Rob. Jennifer fell in love with James and decided to pursue a relationship with him. They started a massage business together, and Jennifer borrowed money in her name. Introducing James as her business partner, Jennifer confided in her sister Alice about her new relationship with another man. Alice disagreed, believing that Jennifer was wrong to cheat on her husband. During a visit, their father, Jerry Harris, noticed 5 large dents in one of the walls of Jennifer's house, which he realized were caused by Rob punching the wall in anger. Rob discovered that Jennifer had cheated on him. He then moved back to his hometown in Bonham, while James moved in with Jennifer. However, their relationship did not last long, as Jennifer's feelings for James began to fade. Although James proposed, Jennifer refused, leading to arguments and conflicts between them. In the spring of 2002, Jennifer officially divorced Rob. Her relationship with James also began to deteriorate. Jennifer's massage business was not profitable, causing her to declare bankruptcy. She realized that she no longer wanted to be in business. Meanwhile, Rob had started dating someone new, with no job and no money. Jennifer decided to contact Rob. She confessed that she still loved him. Rob admitted that, despite being in a new relationship, he remained close to Jennifer. Over the next 2 months, they spent time together about 5 times. During those occasions, James was unaware of this. In late March 2002, Jennifer moved back to her hometown of Bonham, Texas. Just 6 weeks later, on May 12, 2002, Jennifer Harris, 28, went missing. On the day of her disappearance, Jennifer called her ex-husband, Rob, to ask to meet, but he declined because he had plans with friends. Upset about this, Jennifer decided to visit her friend that evening, which was also Mother's Day in the United States. Jennifer went to visit her friend Christy and departed at approximately 8 p.m. Jennifer did not tell Christy where she was going, and she did not return home. After Jennifer's family was unable to reach her, they grew worried and reported her missing to the police. The police quickly took over the case. The first people they interviewed were her ex-husband, Rob Holman, and her ex-boyfriend, James Hamilton. Both men claimed they did not see Jennifer the night she went missing and denied any involvement in her disappearance. James, who was more than an hour away from her home at the time of her disappearance, was with a friend at McDonald's. James was questioned, took a lie detector test, and was later released. Rob Holman, on the other hand, was concerned because he had no alibi and no one could verify his whereabouts that night. He said he was scheduled to visit friends, but they were not home. As a result, he spent 5 hours driving alone on the rural roads of Fannin County, Texas. Rob initially claimed he did not see Jennifer that night, but he did mention spotting a car that looked like hers. However, after being pressed by the police, Rob confessed that he had seen Jennifer driving out of town. He also informed the police about his ex-wife's abusive behavior, stating that Jennifer often cursed at him and even threatened him physically, although he never hit her. He would sometimes hold her hand to stop her when she tried to hit him. Rob agreed to take a lie detector test to verify his statement, but for unknown reasons, the test was never administered. The police later released him. Jennifer's father, Jerry Harris, searched for her for 6 days. Jerry drove around town, asking people if they had seen his daughter. On May 18th, a fisherman discovered the body of a woman near the banks of the Red River and immediately called the police. The body was identified as Jennifer Harris. The police launched an investigation and interviewed Jennifer's friends and family again. A key piece of information came from Jennifer's friend, who revealed that Jennifer had recently told her that she was pregnant. The main question was whether the father was Rob or James. After a forensic expert performed an autopsy, it was discovered that Jennifer's body was missing her uterus. Therefore, the police could not determine whether she was pregnant. The forensic expert could not determine the cause of death due to the body's significant decomposition. Rob reported that, a month before the incident, Jennifer had informed him of her pregnancy and assured him that he would soon be a father, which shocked him. The police were unable to solve Jennifer's case because they could not find any vital evidence or witnesses a year after Jennifer's death. Local residents blamed District Attorney Miles Porter for her death. Porter claimed that he did not know Jennifer and had never met her. Despite supervising her case, he admitted that the community's hostility toward him stemmed from another case he had worked on. Following the public accusations, he lost his job and went into private practice. Police found no evidence implicating Porter in the case. A year later, Deborah, who had seen a news report about Jennifer's unsolved case, reported to the police that she had seen a girl who resembled Jennifer while driving over a bridge on Mother's Day. Deborah noticed 3 young men and a girl. 2 of the men were holding the girl by her elbows, and Jennifer appeared to be trying to escape. Deborah's mother also witnessed the scene, and they believed that Jennifer appeared to be being abused. However, Deborah did not report it to the police at the time because she was too afraid to intervene. Additionally, her account did not match the police timeline. The death of Jennifer Harris had a profound impact on the residents of Fannin County. All who heard her story wanted justice to be served. Specifically, they wanted the perpetrators caught and punished. A year and a half after Jennifer's death, the Texas Rangers took over the investigation. They re-interviewed Deborah, who told the same story she had initially told the police during the investigation. Deborah was shown photos of any men she might recognize from that night. She identified one man as Rob Holman. However, on the advice of his attorney, Rob Holman chose not to speak to the Texas Rangers. After a year of investigating the case, the Texas Rangers had to suspend the investigation due to a lack of evidence and new leads. In 2009, private investigator Daryl Parker took on Jennifer's missing person case. Daryl, a former Navy veteran like Jennifer's father, volunteered to help for free in tracking down the real criminal. Jennifer's sister, Alice, and her husband also became actively involved in the investigation, working together to find the culprit while reviewing the case files. Private investigator Daryl found traces of green sludge on Jennifer's body. Local fishermen had mentioned a specific area along the Red River where similar green sludge could be found. Upon further investigation, Daryl visited the location and confirmed the presence of green sludge on a portion of the bank. Far from the water's edge, he also discovered that there had previously been a guard post in that area. Daryl suspected that Jennifer had left her friend's house and encountered the criminal on her way home. He also believes the attacker burned down the guard post to destroy any evidence. Daryl and his team searched the area around the guardhouse but found no new clues. Exactly 8 years after Jennifer's death, private investigator Daryl visited her ex-husband, Rob Holman. Daryl chose the exact day of Jennifer's death to talk to him. He brought a collection of photos of Jennifer, including photos of her with Rob, with James, and a photo of her body when it was found in the river. Rob initially focused on the photos of Jennifer in the river, staring at one of the photos for a while, which caught Daryl's attention. Daryl told Rob that he could call him any time if he wanted to talk, and left Rob a photo before leaving. A few hours after the meeting, Rob called Daryl to express his desire to talk. Daryl suggested they meet at the office the next day, however. Daryl later realized that he had made a grave mistake in postponing the meeting. He should have met with Rob immediately after the call. The next day, Rob arrived at Daryl's office with his attorney. He continued to deny any involvement in Jennifer's death and was skeptical of her claim that she was pregnant with Rob's child. Noting that no uterus was found in her body, the police were unable to confirm or deny this information. Daryl believed that all the evidence pointed to Jennifer's ex-husband, Rob, as the one responsible for her death. In 2017, 15 years after Jennifer Harris's death, new Fannin County Sheriff Mark Johnson fulfilled his campaign pledge to reopen the investigation. The new sheriff met with Jennifer's father, Jerry, and assured him that they would work to solve the case. Jerry, a former Marine, finally felt hopeful about discovering the truth behind his daughter's death. The sheriff received a large volume of documents related to Jennifer's case, including important papers, posters looking for Jennifer, newspaper articles, and various notes. However, it was discovered that some boxes of evidence had leaked, damaging important documents. Among the missing items were crucial pieces of evidence, such as Jennifer's laptop and clothes. Unfortunately, her shirt, jeans, and bra were missing. After reviewing the documents, the sheriff admitted that the police had handled the case poorly, which left him extremely disappointed. In late 2017, private investigator Joe Mora joined Jennifer's case. He traveled to Dallas, Texas, to re-interview witnesses and found that the initial investigation was flawed. Joe speculates that Jennifer's ex-husband, Rob, had a motive to harm her, to avoid paying 18 years of child support, especially since Rob admitted that Jennifer had informed him of her financial troubles. However, Rob insists that he did not believe Jennifer was pregnant and thought she was simply trying to manipulate him into mending their relationship. Private investigator Joe was surprised to discover that the police had not investigated Jennifer's boyfriend, James, who wanted to marry her. Jennifer's Jerry father noted that 2 months after her death, James contacted Jerry to inquire about her life insurance policy. Additionally, it was discovered that James's alibi had not been thoroughly investigated. It appears that the police accepted his testimony without properly verifying it. Relying solely on a lie detector test to assess his credibility, Joe found Deborah's testimony interesting. He thought that although Deborah claimed she saw a girl who looked like Jennifer on the bridge with 3 men around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, she may not have remembered the exact time. As many people do not pay attention to clocks, it was also noteworthy that Deborah mentioned one of the men resembled Jennifer's ex-husband, Rob Holman, 15 years later. When private investigator Joe tried to contact Deborah, he learned that both she and her mother had passed away. Rob Holman refused to speak to reporters on camera, claiming that he had not seen Jennifer that night. His attorney advised him not to discuss anything related to Jennifer's case. Jennifer's sister, Alice, and her husband believe there are potential witnesses in Jennifer's case who are afraid to come forward to encourage these witnesses. Alice has donated $50 as a reward for anyone who can provide important information about the case. Alice expressed her determination to solve the case. Jennifer's father, Jerry Harris, shared that his life has been very difficult since 2002. He misses his daughter every day. All of their family members miss Jennifer, who is no longer with them. He truly hopes that justice will be served. Jennifer's case remains unsolved to this day. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Faylene Grant. In 2001, a man called 911 for help with. When paramedics arrived, they quickly assisted Faylene Grant and took her to the hospital, where she was placed on life support. It was hoped that she would regain consciousness and explain what had happened. But her condition continued to deteriorate. Eventually, her brain activity stopped, and her husband, Doug Grant, made the difficult decision to disconnect her life support on September 27, 2001. Faylene passed away. Doug remembers waking up and not finding his wife lying beside him, hearing the sound of running water in the bathroom. He became worried because she had been gone for so long. When he checked on her, he found Faylene unconscious and lying face down in the water. He pulled her out and administered CPR until help arrived. The medical examiner ruled her death an accident, but noted in his report that the exact cause had not yet been determined. The examiner found no evidence of a struggle or any signs of foul play on her body, however. The police conducted a thorough investigation as they looked into the circumstances surrounding Faylene's death. They began to suspect that she may have drowned. It is worth noting that Faylene was described as a deeply religious person, according to her religious beliefs. Taking one's own life is considered a serious sin, according to her husband, before her death. Faylene shared a story that God was preparing her for death. In light of this, she decided to purchase life insurance, hoping it would support her loved ones after her passing. Additionally, she planned her funeral. Selecting the details and choosing the music, it was clear that Faylene had given her death significant thought. Even giving her husband permission to remarry after her death, Doug expressed his undying love for Faylene. Describing their marriage as strong and loving, Doug and Faylene's love story began in 1993 when they met at a gym near Phoenix. At the time, Doug was divorced, and Faylene was a beautiful single mother. Both had been through unsuccessful relationships, which helped them bond. They began dating, and their relationship quickly progressed. Leading to marriage just 4 months later, they both maintained their health through proper nutrition and regular exercise. They were devoutly religious and were members of the Mormon Church together. They had 2 sons, in addition to 2 children from previous marriages. Creating a large family of 6, Doug successfully launched a supplement business and later became a sports nutrition consultant. He achieved many milestones, which brought him considerable wealth, allowing his family to live comfortably without financial concerns. However, Doug had one significant flaw. He was unfaithful. Over time, Faylene grew increasingly suspicious of his behavior. Though Doug denied everything, Faylene was deeply hurt, especially because of her strong religious beliefs. In her eyes, his actions were a grave sin, despite her pain. She chose to stay in the marriage for the sake of their children. Unfortunately, things did not improve, and Doug continued to be unfaithful. Eventually, Doug confessed to having affairs with 6 women, which became the breaking point for Faylene. In 2000, she decided to file for divorce. It was an extremely painful and difficult decision for her because she still loved her husband, according to Faylene's friends. She cried almost every night after the divorce. Faylene moved out with their children. Doug appeared satisfied with this arrangement and quickly began a relationship with Hillary DeWitt, a 19-year-old from Louisiana. Their romantic relationship began shortly after the divorce. Doug often told his friends that he would never marry again. However, after working with Hillary for a few weeks, he realized he could not live without her. Hillary, a young employee at his company, accepted his advances, and their relationship developed over several months. Doug was reportedly planning to propose to Hillary, but everything changed in August 2001. Faylene called Doug and asked to meet with him for an important conversation. During their meeting, Faylene revealed that while in a Mormon town she had recently visited, she had a vision in which God told her to remarry Doug. Shocked by this revelation, Doug took some time to reflect and eventually agreed to reconcile. After their discussion, Doug called Hillary and confessed that he had decided to get back together with his ex-wife. Just a few days later, Doug and Faylene were in a Las Vegas church, exchanging vows and officially becoming husband and wife once again. At the time, Hillary was still in love with Doug and did not want to end their relationship. As the police investigated the circumstances surrounding Faylene's death, they began to suspect that it was not an accident, but something far more sinister. A love triangle may have been the motive for the murder, and the police began investigating the final months of Faylene's life. Another theory under consideration was that Doug, or his young lover, Hillary, might have been involved in Faylene's death. However, investigators needed strong evidence to support this claim. Upon further investigation, Police found no disputes over property, custody, or financial matters. Doug and Faylene had reconciled, and there seemed to be no apparent reason for Doug to want Faylene dead. Doug also provided police with valuable information about a diary Faylene had kept. Doug seems to have no intention of leaving Hillary. Even after marrying Faylene for the second time, they continue to see each other even after Faylene's death. In her diary, Faylene shares her views on faith and family. The police discover that Hillary has been repeatedly calling Doug when they check her phone records. Doug claims that their conversations revolve around Faylene's worrying condition, but the police suspect that there may be something more disturbing behind those calls. Additionally, Faylene remains unaware of Doug and Hillary's affair. Her diary contains reflections on her life. Instead of expressing a desire to end her life, she writes that her inevitable fate has shown her a future in which she will not become a devout Mormon. She accepts her fate and seems to face it calmly. On September 7, she spoke to her sisters and mentioned that, just 6 days earlier, she felt as if she had met the Grim Reaper. Faylene was even surprised to find herself still alive. On September 17, she contacted all her relatives again and said goodbye. Stating that she would be leaving soon, she even discussed her feelings with her physical therapist, who suggested that she focus less on these thoughts and more on positive things. The therapist believed that her anxiety was due to stress. During questioning, Doug recounted the details of the morning he found his wife dead. He explained that he had been struggling with insomnia, which led him to take sleeping pills that had been recommended and prescribed by a doctor friend. Doug could not understand how Faylene could have drowned in the bathtub. He believes that her death was an accident, or that she may have ended her own life. Faylene's sister contacted the police with important information. An old friend of Doug's claimed that Doug had confessed to him about killing his wife. Doug explained that he believed his wife was ready to die, so he put her in the bathtub, which led to her drowning. However, the witness asked Faylene's family for Dollarton to testify. The police met with the man and convinced him to assist the investigation without any payment. He agreed and invited a friend to join him, secretly recording their conversation. Although the man tried various tactics to get Doug to confess, Doug never explicitly admitted to his crime, however. Doug's nervous behavior and evasive responses raised suspicion. In the summer of 2005, police arrested Doug, charging him with Faylene's murder. He quickly posted bail and returned home while awaiting trial. It was not until 7 years after Faylene's death that Doug finally appeared in court. The trial lasted 4 months and attracted considerable media attention. During the trial, Faylene's family and friends stated that she showed no signs of mental health problems or depression. Faylene did not use drugs or alcohol and remained calm until her final days. The prosecution found Doug's behavior after the incident to be suspicious. During questioning, he claimed to have called 911 himself, but in fact, it was the doctor who prescribed the medication that morning who made the call after conducting toxicology tests. The results showed that Faylene's blood contained enough sedatives to prevent her from moving around the house. This supported the theory that Doug had placed her in a bathtub filled with water, causing her to drown. Surprisingly, Faylene's eldest daughter reported to the police that she saw her stepfather take her mother into a room and close the door at that time. The girl had no idea what was happening inside and did not witness her mother being submerged in water, which is why she initially did not provide any information to the police. Years later, Faylene's daughter was determined to seek justice for her mother after realizing what had happened. She felt extremely guilty about the situation. Doug did not pay attention to her daughter and was unaware that she was awake at that hour. She did not know that her mother was dying right behind the door. Now, with a heavy heart, she regrets not trying to knock and enter the room, believing that it could have saved Fayleen's life, however. She also understands that this could have put her own safety at risk. Doug's attorney argued that the police were determined to blame Doug, which led to serious errors and irregularities in the investigation. The defense pointed out that much of the evidence relied upon was of poor quality. In fact, a significant amount of the evidence collected was lost or destroyed, including Fayleen's clothing and medications. This was attributed to the incompetence of the forensic scientists and police involved in the case. In addition, none of Fayleen's diary entries were presented for review. The attorney mentioned that a new life insurance policy had been issued to Fayleen, but it had not been in effect at the time of her death. The attorney argued that if Doug had wanted to marry Hillary, he would not have needed to kill Fayleen to achieve this. They could have simply divorced. As they had done before, the defense contended that Doug had no strong motive to kill his wife. However, the prosecution maintained that Doug had cruelly manipulated Fayleen, causing her to appear insane due to her religious beliefs, thereby creating the illusion of her own voluntary decision to end her life. Hillary supported Doug throughout the trial and asked for his acquittal. Fayleen had sent letters to Hillary shortly before her death, urging her to marry Doug and adopt her children a few weeks after the tragedy. Hillary complied with this request and adopted Fayleen and Doug's two children. Fayleen's two children from her first marriage went to live with their biological father during her marriage to Doug. Hillary had a daughter. Throughout their 7 years together, Hillary felt the disapproving eyes of others who considered her a family destroyer. However, Hillary claimed that Doug had never treated her cruelly. The prosecution argued that Doug did not seem to mourn his wife Fayleen after her death. Just hours after the tragedy, he visited Hillary, leaning against her car, hugging her, and whispering affectionate words. This behavior did not appear consistent with that of a grieving person. Doug's daughter, who expressed her concerns in court, alleged that Doug had brainwashed her mother into believing that death was a natural part of God's plan, causing Fayleen to prepare for her own death. After lengthy deliberations, the jury found Doug Grant guilty of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Matthew Podolak. Matthew Podolak, known as Matt, was born on June 10, 1975, in Parma, Ohio, USA. He is the son of Patricia and Joseph Podolak in high school. He was a member of the hockey team. After graduating, Matthew joined the United States Navy and completed his military service. Upon returning to civilian life, he worked at an industrial finishing company owned by his uncle. However, Matthew's work environment was challenging, according to his sister, Chrissy DeLuca. Some of his co-workers disliked him, partly because he was set to receive a promotion they believed he did not deserve. Meanwhile, his uncle was grooming him to eventually take over the business. Matthew had a passion for outdoor activities and enjoyed boating, hiking, fishing, hunting, as well as playing softball and hockey in his free time. In 2003, he met Holly McFeature, and they quickly began dating. They soon moved into a house in Cleveland. Friends described Matthew as overjoyed to have found someone with whom he could build a family. Within a year, their first daughter, Samantha, was born, and 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Josh. Holly also had a child from a previous relationship. Matthew's mother, Patricia, remarked, "When Matthew fell in love, he fell in love 110%, and he really loved Holly." So, in a short span of time, Matthew transitioned from being a bachelor to a father of 3. The first few years of his relationship with Holly were filled with mutual understanding, love, and passion. By the mid-20s, Matthew and Holly's relationship had become strained. They frequently arguments and full of disagreements. When they fought, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's house. This happened repeatedly, and Matthew's friends urged him to end the relationship, as they felt Holly was selfish and untrustworthy. However, Matthew always returned to Holly. He had a life insurance policy naming Holly as the beneficiary. His friends advised him to remove her as the beneficiary, but he ignored their suggestions. According to Russell, Matthew's best friend, his emotions during this time fluctuated dramatically. He was sometimes very happy, at other times crying, and occasionally seemed scared. Russell also observed that Matthew had become depressed. Still, Matthew remained hopeful about raising his 3 children. Concerned about the unstable environment at home, Russell advised him to take precautions, including removing any weapons from the house. In 2006, after the hockey season ended, Matthew started gambling online, which led to significant financial losses. His family and friends noticed that he seemed unwell and increasingly depressed. Following their advice, he consulted a doctor who prescribed antidepressants. By the spring of 2006, Matthew's health began to worsen. On Memorial Day, Russell became very concerned about Matthew's physical condition. Russell asked Matthew to help move a motor from one boat to another, but Matthew, who used to be very strong, had gained weight, was sweating heavily. He complained of back pain and said he had lost strength. Russell urged him to seek medical attention and recommended a doctor. Matthew visited the doctor on July 26, 2006, before the appointment. He called Russell to ask for directions to the doctor's office. During the call, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew, insulting him by calling him too stupid to find the office. At the appointment, doctor diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication for both the stones and the associated pain. At noon on July 30, Matthew called his father to tell him he had bought his daughter a fishing rod and wanted to plan a fishing trip in the coming days. That evening, Matthew attended a party with Russell. He later testified that Matthew's health seemed poor. Later that day, Matthew's father called an ambulance out of concern for his son, noting that Matthew sounded confused and very upset during a brief phone call. When the ambulance arrived, Matthew was taken to Parma Hospital with suspected multiple organ failure. At the hospital, doctors discovered that Matthew's kidneys were failing and diagnosed him with metabolic acidosis, a condition where his blood had become very acidic. Dr. Mandate, one of the ambulance crew doctors, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance like methanol or antifreeze. Holly was present at the hospital, and when asked if Matthew had swallowed antifreeze or rubbing alcohol, she denied it. The following day, on July 31, 2006, Matthew passed away in the hospital due to kidney failure, according to Dr. Mandate. Metabolic acidosis is usually caused by breathing problems, but this was not the case for Matthew. Instead, he explained that ethylene glycol, a toxic chemical found in antifreeze, could also cause metabolic acidosis. Matthew's death deeply affected his family and friends. Holly's friend, Rebecca Vega, supported her in the days following Matthew's passing. She accompanied Holly to the funeral home to make arrangements, but Vega noticed something strange. Holly displayed no emotion and even began whistling in the room where the coffin would later be placed. For visitors, she appeared completely indifferent. Russell also described Holly's behavior as if she were at a celebration, acting as though nothing had happened. Soon after, the day after Matthew's death, Holly went to the bank and withdrew money from his account using his bank card. She also wrote checks in his name and emptied the account entirely. After Matthew's mother reported Holly's actions to the police, Holly was arrested and charged with 2 counts of forgery. Holly later agreed to pay damages, claiming she had taken the money to provide for the children after Matthew's death. Holly was the beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy, but the payout was small. she received only $10 2 weeks after Matthew's death. Rebecca visited her and noticed open bottles of cleaning products in the house, concerned about the safety of the young children living there. Rebecca asked Holly about them. Holly explained that one of the bottles contained antifreeze, which Matthew had allegedly used for his boat. However, Russell said that Matthew had not had a working boat since 2004 or 2005, when the boat's engine failed. After Matthew passed away, all his belongings were removed from the house. Holly gave Matthew's computer to a friend to erase some of its contents and destroyed his clothes by cutting them up and throwing them away. Now his father and brother have no things left of Matthew to remember. The autopsy revealed that Matthew had large amounts of ethylene glycol, the active ingredient in antifreeze, in his system. Holly claimed that Matthew might have ingested it intentionally to harm himself. However, the medical examiner was unable to determine the cause of death. Additionally, Holly told she had no idea what antifreeze was. She gave conflicting accounts to others, including telling a friend that Matthew had died at work. She also said that one of his colleagues could have poisoned him out of envy because he was the boss's nephew and had an advantage over other employees. However, Matthew's family believed that the culprit could have been someone much closer. Holly's sister claimed that Holly cried in the car before the funeral, but her lack of emotion during the service surprised Matthew's family. Later that year, Holly met Jameson Kennedy, her ex-boyfriend, at a bar by the spring of 2008. They had started dating, but Holly never shared any details about Matthew's death with him. Jameson had a serious criminal history and struggled with alcohol and banned substance. In September 2008, while drinking and intimate, Holly became very emotional and began talking about Matthew. She cried, saying she just wanted everything to end and that she wanted to leave Cleveland. She expressed regret about what had happened. When Jameson asked her what she regretted, Holly admitted that she had put something in Matthew's drink that made him feel sick and ultimately caused his death. Jameson was uncertain whether Holly was being truthful. After hearing her confession, he consulted his old friend, a lawyer. Jameson confided in his friend that Holly had admitted to killing Matthew, believing the confession to be credible. His friend reported it to law enforcement. Later, Jameson called Holly to discuss her confession without informing her that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she would reaffirm that Matthew's death was caused by her tampering with his drink. However, during the call, Holly firmly denied ever harming Matthew. After this, Jameson and Holly's relationship began to deteriorate. Jameson suspected her of being unfaithful. On November 8, 2008, he visited her house to confront her and express his anger. Frightened, Holly called the police. When officers arrived at the house, Jameson attacked them. He was arrested and charged with assault. He was subsequently sentenced to 10 years in prison for assaulting the officers following his arrest. Jameson decided to inform the police about Holly's confession, so there was more and more evidence pointing to Holly being involved in Matthew's death. Police had initially begun investigating Matthew's death in 2007 after the autopsy report was released. However, since the police did not consider Matthew's death to be a homicide, the case stalled. Dr. Galita, a forensic pathologist and medical examiner with over 10 years of experience, conducted Matthew's autopsy the day after his death. In January 2007, 6 months later, he released a detailed autopsy report co-signed by the county doctor. The report concluded that Matthew had died from ethylene glycol poisoning. Though the manner of death remained undetermined, Dr. Galita explained that after ethylene glycol entered Matthew's body, it traveled through his blood to his liver. A significant buildup of these crystals caused blockages, according to Dr. Galita. The flank pain Matthew had been suffering since May 20, 2006, was attributed to these blockages. Upon examining his kidneys, the doctor observed extensive damage, as well as signs that the organs were attempting to heal. Crystals were also found throughout other parts of Matthew's body, including his brain and ears. The examination further revealed that Matthew had very severe acute myocarditis. Dr. Galita concluded that myocarditis could not have developed from one episode of acute ethylene glycol intoxication. Instead, it would have required at least 3 months to manifest. He concluded that Matthew died of chronic ethylene glycol poisoning that occurred over a 3-month period. Matthew's friends noted that his favorite drink was raspberry iced tea, which he frequently brought to work. Matthew's friend mentioned that Holly occasionally delivered Matthew's lunch to work, which always included a bottle of raspberry iced tea. In August 2007, police discovered 2 bottles of Pensarn antifreeze in Holly's garage. In 2010, 3 years after the original autopsy report, the forensic expert issued an amended report concluding that Matthew had died from chronic ethylene glycol poisoning and declaring his death to be a homicide. The amended report did not change the cause of death, but changed the manner of death to homicide. In July 2012, Holly McFeature was charged with the aggravated intentional killing of Matthew Podolak and the distribution of a substance not intended for human consumption. Matthew's older brother, Mark, revealed that their family suspected Holly's involvement in Matthew's death. Investigators believed that Holly had been secretly adding antifreeze to Matthew's iced raspberry tea over the course of several weeks or even months. Holly pleaded not guilty and went to trial in 2013. The case against her relied entirely on circumstantial evidence during the trial. The prosecution called 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family, friends, his doctor, Dr. Galita, and several police officers involved in the investigation. Testimony covered Holly's suspicious behavior, a phone call she made to Matthew before he visited his doctor, and the fact that Matthew had not owned a working boat since 2004 and had no practical reason to use antifreeze. Meanwhile, Holly's defense attorney argued that Matthew's family and friends were quick to blame her without any concrete evidence, putting enormous pressure on law enforcement to act against her so soon after Matthew's death. The prosecution's main witness, forensic expert Dr. Galita, conducted the autopsy on Matthew. Dr. Galita provided a detailed explanation of how he determined that Matthew had been poisoned over a period of 3 months. He discovered crystals in Matthew's kidneys and signs of cardiac myocarditis, which are consistent with prolonged exposure to ethylene glycol. He ruled out other potential causes, such as fungal or viral infections, and clarified that myocarditis could not have been the result of a single acute exposure to ethylene glycol. Other witnesses supported Dr. Galita's findings. Matthew's friends testified that his health began to decline in the spring of 2006. In July 2006, he was diagnosed with kidney stones, and his condition worsened over time. Regarding Matthew's relationship with Holly, prosecution witnesses described it as increasingly strained. Holly's lawyers claimed that their client was not involved in Matthew's death. They argued that Matthew was depressed due to significant gambling losses, work-related struggles. The defense suggested that he intentionally ingested a fatal dose of antifreeze. They also maintained that Matthew's death resulted from a single instance of poisoning, rather than repeated doses over time, to support their argument. The defense called Dr. Robert Bucks, an expert from El Paso County, Colorado. He testified that Matthew's death was caused by acute poisoning, meaning a one-time exposure to ethylene glycol, which could indicate he was intent on self-harm. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's conclusion that Matthew had myocarditis, and instead argued that Matthew likely suffered a heart attack. He further explained that myocarditis can occur without ethylene glycol poisoning, and that lower back pain is not a symptom of such poisoning. Additionally, Dr. Bucks stated there is no link between kidney stones and poisoning. However, the prosecution presented evidence that, while Matthew experienced some depression, he was committed to being a father to his children and was making plans for them. Testimony also revealed that Matthew had sought medical treatment for both his mental health and physical issues. Jamison Kennedy testified in court, claiming that Holly had confessed to him that she spiked Matthew's drink. However, Holly denied ever making such a confession. Jamison's testimony was supported by Inspector Mike Quinn, who noted that when Jamison told law enforcement of Holly's confession, there was no public knowledge that Matthew had died from ethylene glycol poisoning. This refutes the theory that Jamison might have fabricated his testimony based on information he heard elsewhere. Holly, however, argued that Jamison made the accusation either to secure a reduced sentence for his own crimes or to take revenge on her. The jury spent 3 days deliberating and weighing the evidence and testimony presented before the court. Ultimately, on August 28, 2013, they found Holly McFeature guilty on all counts related to the death of Matthew Podolak. Evidence of questionable conduct, particularly her use of ethylene glycol and her strained relationship with Matthew, played a significant role in Holly's conviction. The court sentenced Holly to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This decision reflected the seriousness of the case, as well as the significant risk that Holly's actions posed to others. Although she would be eligible to apply for parole after 30 years, the success of her parole request would remain a major challenge and was uncertain. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kirk Langford. Masumi was born in the Japanese town of Sado to parents Hichi and Fiko. She has 2 older brothers, Kenya and Rio. Masumi grew up in a loving and supportive family, did well in school, earned good grades, and was well behaved. In her 20s, Masumi visited Hawaii for the first time with her family and immediately fell in love with the island after returning home. She decided to visit again the following year. In 2007, although her parents were initially reluctant to let her travel alone due to safety concerns, they eventually realized how important the trip was to her and agreed to her plan. At the age of 21, Masumi packed her bags, said goodbye to her family, and boarded a plane to Hawaii. She planned to stay for about 2 months and wanted to make the most of her time there. Her goals included improving her English and volunteering at Sunset Beach Elementary School, located nearby on the island of Oahu. During her time there, Masumi also enjoyed reading and studying history at the local library. Masumi was quite petite, and due to her astigmatism, she had to wear special glasses. She was a kind and somewhat naive girl, which could have made her an easy target for criminals. However, she did not feel any danger. Instead, she felt extremely comfortable living in Hawaii. As the weeks passed, Masumi's trip was filled with unforgettable joy. However, her vacation was coming to an end while she looked forward to reuniting with her loved ones. She also realized how much she would miss this sunny paradise and how long she would have to wait until her next visit on April 12, 2007, around 9:30 a.m. One of Masumi's friends dropped her off at the end of the road. And, as usual, Masumi decided to go for a walk. The area was not too isolated, so she felt safe. She walked along the road toward the home of her family friend, Yumi, with still half a mile to go. After 2 hours had passed without Masumi returning to house, Yumi's family began to worry. Yumi and her husband went looking for Masumi, but after searching the entire road without finding her, they felt that something was wrong. The couple called the police to report Masumi missing. The news quickly spread across the islands, and eventually, family friends notified Masumi's parents in Japan. Local residents soon organized a search effort. Masumi's small stature and limited English skills make her stand out, but they also make her more vulnerable to danger. The investigation began at the house where she was staying. Although nothing suspicious was found, experts collected DNA samples as a precaution. No clues were discovered. Her suitcase and plane ticket back to Japan were found on the table. As news of Masumi's disappearance spread, many people came to the police station with potential information about her whereabouts. A local resident provided a crucial piece of information, reporting that she had seen a young woman matching Masumi's description that morning. A man had tried to persuade her to get into a truck, but she repeatedly refused. The witness also recalled that the truck was white, which became a key detail in the investigation. Witnesses began searching the area for white trucks and checked the island's vehicle database. During this process, a second witness provided a similar account, adding that the truck had a company logo on its body. Fortunately, the man even remembered the name, Howoli Pest Control. This information significantly narrowed the search area. Police then identified the suspect as Kirk Langford, a technician for Howoli Pest Control. He was born in 1985 and grew up on the island of Oahu. A neighbor mentioned that the Langfords had moved to the area about a year and a half ago and that they generally received positive reviews. They were described as friendly and religious. Kirk and his pregnant girlfriend led a quiet life. They had a young son and were expecting a second child. Kirk was known as a kind and gentle man who hosted charity Bible studies at his home, and his family regularly attended church. He was considered a trustworthy and moral person. Therefore, when rumors of his involvement in Masumi's kidnapping arose, many found it hard to believe. Kirk himself repeatedly stated that he knew nothing about Masumi's disappearance and had no involvement in the incident. However, he admitted that he was in the area the morning of her disappearance and was driving a white truck at a certain time. He claimed that this was just a coincidence and suggested that witnesses may have been mistaken. There was not enough evidence to arrest him, so the police eventually released him but left their contact information, asking him to call if he remembered anything else in the days that followed. The police discovered that Kirk owned another white truck, a Ford F-150. They examined Masumi's belongings, such as her toothbrush and a spare pair of glasses, to create a DNA profile for her. Over time, it became increasingly clear that Kirk was directly involved in the kidnapping, making it highly unlikely that Masumi had run away from home. One day, a homeless man came to the police and shared that, while he was walking, he noticed a man digging near a parked white truck. When the homeless man asked what the man was doing, he replied that he was looking for a lost necklace, which seemed suspicious. The homeless man wrote down the truck's license plate number. After an investigation, it was confirmed that the license plate number belonged to Kirk's white Ford F-150. The police had two key pieces of information. A witness saw Kirk's truck near Masumi, and another witness confirmed that Kirk was digging near his car. However, this information alone was not strong enough to obtain a search warrant. Nevertheless, because Kirk had an outstanding traffic ticket, the police were permitted to seize both vehicles for a detailed examination. They also summoned Kirk for questioning, but he refused to answer any questions without a lawyer present. He subsequently took a polygraph test, which he failed. Fortunately for him, polygraph results are not legally admissible in court. The police understood that their best chance of arresting Kirk was to obtain a positive DNA match from his truck and Masumi's belongings. Unfortunately, the processing of the DNA samples took too long, compelling the police to release him. Ultimately, the police found key evidence inside Kirk's work truck. They discovered blood and glasses on the upholstery. A few days later, tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Masumi Watanabe, and the glasses found in the truck matched hers exactly. At this point, Masumi's case shifted from being classified as a missing persons case to a murder investigation. Kirk was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. During a subsequent interrogation, he changed his story, claiming that he had actually seen Masumi on the day of the incident. In this new account, he stated that he had accidentally hit her with his car, causing only minor injuries. He claimed he attempted to take her to the hospital, and she reportedly agreed. However, after driving a short distance, she suddenly jumped out of the truck. The car was traveling at over 40 miles per hour, resulting in Masumi hitting her head upon impact. Kirk attributed her strange behavior to their lack of communication. Citing her poor English as a contributing factor, he confessed that Masumi had been severely injured and died instantly after jumping from the vehicle, instead of calling the police. He hid her body in the back of his truck that evening. Kirk cleaned out the truck and returned home to have dinner with his wife and children. He then went to a store to make a purchase. Surveillance cameras recorded him at 2 stores buying gloves, a shovel, chlorine-based cleaner, and trash bags. He then transferred the body from the company truck to his own vehicle and drove out into the countryside. There, a homeless man saw him digging, supposedly looking for a necklace, but in reality, he was digging a grave to bury Masumi when Kirk was discovered by the homeless man. He panicked. Instead of burying Masumi, as he had initially planned, he threw her body into the ocean. He later explained that he lied to the police because he was afraid of losing his job in an interview. Kirk's live-in girlfriend mentioned that, after dinner on April 12, Kirk went out to work, and when he returned home, she noticed some stains on his clothes. Interestingly, Kirk's girlfriend later recanted her statement. However, the police returned to the burial site but found no evidence. Kirk's claim that he had abandoned his plan to bury the body there turned out to be correct, and, unfortunately, Masumi's body was never found. There was sufficient evidence to convict Kirk, including the testimony of several witnesses, a DNA match linking Masumi to Kirk's belongings, and Kirk's own statements. However, since there was no evidence of intentional conduct, it was challenging to charge him with first-degree murder. As a result, prosecutors decided to charge him with second-degree murder on March 4, 2008, nearly a year after Masumi's disappearance. The trial began. Kirk maintained that the incident was accidental, arguing that Masumi had jumped out of the moving truck on her own and that he was not responsible for her death. Kirk's parents attended the trial and insisted that their son was a good person who could never commit murder. They argued that he was the victim of a plot by the police. The prosecution believed that although Kirk had not planned the kidnapping or murder in advance, they also rejected his claim that the incident was accidental. Experts pointed out that if Kirk had actually hit Masumi with his car, his vehicle would have been damaged. However, upon examination, no such damage was found on the truck. Furthermore, the injuries the girl sustained must have been much more severe than Kirk described, making his entire testimony seem implausible. The police and Masumi's family believed that Kirk had buried her body nearby instead of throwing it into the sea. However, in court, Kirk insisted that he had thrown her body into the ocean. The police contended that if the body had indeed been thrown into the ocean, the tide would eventually wash it ashore, as they had seen in similar cases. Because Masumi's body was never found, the police could not determine the cause of her death or whether she had been abused. Masumi's parents attended the trial. At one point, Kirk told them that he had not tortured Masumi. However, her parents, like the prosecutors, did not believe him. Masumi's father stated that every night he heard Masumi's voice, calling for him to take her home. Masumi's mother expressed that the family would not find peace until they could bring their beloved daughter back to Japan and give her a proper burial. After reviewing the evidence presented in court, the jury deliberated for a day and a half. Ultimately, Kirk Langford was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. This is one of the longest sentences in Hawaiian history. Kirk's appeal was denied. It is hard to describe the depth of pain her family and friends must have felt. Losing a child is one of the hardest experiences for any parent, especially when they cannot even lay their daughter to rest. Masumi was a shy, gentle girl with her whole life ahead of her. She was drawn to the Hawaiian Islands and loved them dearly. Tragically, what was once a true paradise for Masumi became her final resting place. After the verdict, Masumi's mother made an emotional plea. She bowed humbly before the court and begged Kirk to show them where the body was buried. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Charlotte Mulhall. In March 2005, a gruesome murder occurred in Ireland When a fisherman made a disturbing discovery in a canal, he initially thought he had found a mannequin, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was part of a human leg wearing a sock. He immediately contacted the police. The subsequent investigation revealed many details about this infamous case. The Mulhall family lived in South Dublin, Ireland, consisting of parents John and Kathleen and their 6 children, 3 daughters and 3 sons. The family faced challenges related to alcohol and substance abuse. Both parents drank regularly, and their arguments often became loud and violent, all in front of the children, despite their troubled marriage. John and Kathleen remained together for 27 years. However, by the early 2000s, when their children were grown, they decided to divorce due to financial issues, but continued to live together. At first, it seemed that family life was getting better. However, in 2002, Kathleen introduced her new boyfriend, Farah Swala Noor, who was 14 years her junior. Kathleen's ex-husband, John, felt uncomfortable having a stranger in his home, especially since Farah was now sharing a bed with Kathleen. In response, John decided to leave and move in with his girlfriend. Unfortunately, his new partner soon kicked him out of the house, and he spent a year wandering around Dublin before returning home. Luckily for John, by that time, Kathleen and Farah had moved into a rented flat in another area of Dublin. Farah arrived in Ireland in December 1996 under the false name Sheelila Salim. He claimed to be from Somalia and said that his entire family had died in the Civil War. In fact, he was from Kenya and his family still lived there. Farah had a record of minor crimes, and when his deception was discovered, he faced deportation. He successfully appealed the decision. In March 1999, he married a Dublin resident, and they had a child together, which enabled him to obtain Irish citizenship after naturalization. Farah left his wife and began living a chaotic life, relying on odd jobs and petty theft to make ends meet. Farah had a violent past, including an incident in which he abused a mentally disabled Chinese woman, although she bore him a son. Farah escaped punishment for his actions. Reports suggest he harbored a deep hatred for women. In 2002, Farah met Kathleen, and they began a tumultuous relationship. Both were unemployed and relied on odd jobs to make ends meet. Their shared love of alcohol initially bonded them, but over time, their difficult personalities led to frequent arguments, which Kathleen's children often witnessed. Kathleen's eldest daughter, Linda, was born in 1975. She dropped out of school at a young age. By the age of 24, she had 4 children and often forgot the names of her boyfriends due to a series of short-lived relationships. Linda also served a short prison sentence for theft and struggled with alcohol and drug addiction. Linda's younger sister, Charlotte, had her own legal troubles, with around 7 convictions for theft, property damage, escort services, and other misdemeanors. Like Linda, Charlotte also struggled with serious addiction issues. The other siblings also had their own legal problems, and none were considered positive role models. On Sunday, March 20, 2005, Linda invited Charlotte to her apartment. While they were talking in the kitchen, Charlotte suggested that they start celebrating her birthday, which was the next day. At first, Linda refused because she had been abstaining from alcohol for 3 weeks to regain custody of her children, who were in a shelter. However, the temptation to drink became too strong, and half an hour later, they opened a bottle of hard liquor to start the birthday celebration. A few hours later, the sisters decided to visit their mother and her partner, Farah. When they called their mother, they found out that Kathleen and Farah were at a bar in central Dublin. Without hesitation, the sisters joined them. It turned out that Kathleen and Farah had been celebrating St. Patrick's Day for 4 consecutive days. After meeting Linda and Charlotte at the bar, the family did not stay long and decided to continue celebrating at a nearby park. However, Farah got into an argument with some locals, forcing the family to stay out of trouble and decide to go home. The 4 of them returned to Kathleen and Farah's rented apartment They prepared food and set the table to celebrate Charlotte's upcoming birthday. When everything was ready, Farah fell asleep to lift Farah's spirits. Kathleen slipped a pill into his drink. Although the ecstasy worked, things did not go as they had expected. A moment later, Linda, who was sitting on the sofa, suddenly felt Farah caress and squeeze her legs. Then he put his arm around her waist and whispered inappropriate words into her ear. At first, Linda did not want to cause a scandal, so she reminded Farah to behave after witnessing Farah's inappropriate actions. Linda openly asked him to take his hands off her, realizing that the situation was escalating. Kathleen and Charlotte began to insult Farah and asked him to behave properly. The argument quickly turned into a fight. Then, Farah grabbed Kathleen, causing her to scream for help to her daughters. In response, Charlotte pulled a knife from her pocket and attacked Farah, seeing her sister Charlotte in danger. Linda rushed to the pantry and grabbed a large iron hammer under the influence of alcohol. Linda lost control of her actions. Soon, the floors, walls, and rooms were in chaos. Meanwhile, the girl's mother, Kathleen, sat in a chair, holding a glass and watching her two daughters attack Farah. Eventually, she grew tired of the commotion and turned her attention to the television, where an entertainment program was playing. After the altercation, the sisters began to understand what had happened, and panic set in. Kathleen stepped in to help and gave Linda and Charlotte a plan for how to dispose of Farah's body. Kathleen said that no one would charge them with murder if Farah's body was not found. So Linda and Charlotte spent the next 5 hours in the bathroom processing the body. During this time, Kathleen took a nap. When Kathleen woke up, she found 7 black plastic bags in the hallway. She called her ex-husband John to tell him about the nightmare that had unfolded in their rented apartment. John was skeptical and did not believe her at first. However, when he arrived and saw the scene from the front door, he realized it was no joke. He declared that he would not participate and went home. After a short break, Kathleen and her 2 daughters began a thorough cleaning of the apartment. They used brooms and several gallons of bleach to meticulously wipe down every surface. At noon on March 21, Kathleen, Linda, and Charlotte left the rented apartment, each carrying a sports bag containing black trash bags. They walked to the nearest river channel and, unnoticed, threw 6 black bags into the water. The women then went to a restaurant. Afterward, they took a bus for about an hour to the city center. Once there, they stopped at a large store, browsed several areas, withdrew money from an ATM, and went to a park. In the park, they dug a shallow hole with a knife and buried the last bag. They eventually threw the knife and hammer into a nearby pond before returning home. Over the next few days, Kathleen and her daughters focused on cleaning the rental apartment. Kathleen bought a large amount of cleaning supplies. She later admitted that there was a terrible, nauseating smell in the room that no cleaning product could remove. Kathleen and Charlotte coped with the smell by drinking and using drugs to forget it. However, Linda was very distressed, crying constantly and unable to calm down. 10 days later, one of the bags that Kathleen and her daughters had thrown into the Dublin Canal floated to the surface. A local fisherman discovered it and quickly called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they drained the canal, and divers searched the area, eventually finding 6 black bags containing the man's body. A forensic expert determined that the man had suffered 28 injuries due to the brutal nature of the case. The police initially speculated that he may have died during a witchcraft ritual, but later ruled this theory out after consulting with experts. The police knew they needed to solve the case by identifying the victim. However, the DNA database did not have any matches for the body. Therefore, officers decided to take a different approach. They shared descriptions and photos of the items found in the victim's bag through social media. Among these items was a torn T-shirt with the logo of an Irish football club. This shirt helped identify the victim as Farah Swaleh Noor. As one of his old friends from Somalia recognized it, this friend also mentioned that Farah had been missing for several weeks and had stopped answering calls. Police discovered that Farah had been living with a girlfriend named Kathleen Mulhall for the past few years. This information prompted further investigation. Samilit received a cash reward for helping to locate Kathleen, while two others, Linda and Charlotte, were brought in for questioning. All three denied any involvement, and the police had no evidence to charge the women. So they were released the same day. In July 2005, one of Kathleen's sons, who was serving time in prison for a traffic violation, informed a guard that his mother and sisters had killed Farah. He claimed that during a prison visit, Kathleen had confessed to the crime to him. Following this revelation, the police searched Kathleen's apartment and discovered traces of Farah's blood. In August 2005, Kathleen, Linda, and Charlotte were again questioned at the police station. They maintained their innocence, and the interrogation lasted 12 hours. Kathleen and her two daughters, Linda and Charlotte, were then released. During this time, Linda, who was extremely remorseful, called the police at the end of August and confessed to the crime, leading them to the park where they had buried a black bag that eventually contained Farah's body. However, it is believed that the black bag was unearthed and moved to another location shortly after Linda's confession. In September 2005, Kathleen Mulhall fled to England. In December 2005, Linda and Charlotte were arrested and charged with murder. Shortly afterward, their biological father, John, who was looking after the four children on his own, died. It is believed that he had nothing to do with the crime. Linda and Charlotte's trial began in October 2006, with Linda facing a charge of manslaughter and Charlotte charged with attempted murder. During the trial, both women claimed they acted in self-defense, maintained their innocence, and stated that they were trying to protect their mother. After a brief deliberation, the jury found Charlotte Mulhall and Linda Mulhall guilty. The judge sentenced Linda to 15 years in prison, while Charlotte received a life sentence. It was reported that both sisters had exhibited poor behavior while incarcerated in a women's prison in Dublin. One day, Linda injured her hand and spent several weeks in the hospital. Charlotte attracted media attention after a photograph was released of Charlotte attacking a male prisoner. The incident led to increased security measures at all prisons in Ireland, and Charlotte was subsequently transferred to a higher security facility in Limerick. Kathleen Mulhall's story began when she fled Ireland in September 2005 and assumed a new identity in the UK. However, in January 2008, a reporter discovered her location and reported her to the police. As a result, Kathleen was forced to return to Ireland, where she faced numerous charges. She confessed to helping her daughters dispose of their bodies and clean their apartment. In May 2009, Kathleen was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but was released after serving only 2 years. After her release in October 2011, she returned to the UK and moved in with her son, James. At that time, James's family consisted of his 6 children and the 4 children of his sister, Linda. He adopted Linda's children after she was arrested. After Kathleen arrived, tensions rose between James and his live-in girlfriend, eventually leading to an incident in which he assaulted her and was subsequently imprisoned. Kathleen later suffered severe kidney failure and underwent an organ transplant in Dublin. She now lives in her hometown, where she continues to receive treatment. Linda was released early from her sentence that same year. She now lives with her children and her new partner. Linda does not give interviews to journalists. In a recent statement to the media, she said, "She have served my sentence. Let she live in peace after all. This is she personal life, and it is none of your." Since March 2023, Charlotte has been allowed to leave prison for 1 day. Under close supervision by guards, she may soon be eligible for parole. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. Stephanie Flores Ramirez was born on July 22, 1988, to Ricardo Flores and Mari Elena Ramirez. She was a kind and easygoing child. Her family was quite wealthy. Her father was involved in the auto racing industry and was building a successful political career. Stephanie grew up in a prestigious family. Her 4 brothers were all from the upper class and had access to the best education. Stephanie excelled in school, earning the admiration and respect of her teachers and classmates. In 2008, at the age of 20, Stephanie enrolled at the University of San Martin de Porres to study business administration. By 2010, as a third-year student, she had many great ideas and hopes for her future. Despite her innocent appearance and excellent academic performance, Stephanie knew how to enjoy life with a lot of money at her disposal. She frequented the best nightclubs and casinos in the country. On the night of May 30, 2010, at a casino called Atlantic City, Stephanie met a mysterious man named Joran van der Sloot at around 3 a.m. She sat down at the poker table next to him, and they were instantly attracted to each other, although they came from different countries. They both spoke fluent English and quickly found common ground. Stephanie was drawn to Joran's confidence and easygoing demeanor, while he was captivated by her beauty and smile. During their conversation, Stephanie asked Joran how he came to Lima. He said he was on vacation to escape some personal troubles. At that time, Stephanie had no idea that his troubles were related to the murder of a woman. Joran deceived her by claiming that he was the son of a wealthy lawyer and judge. This made Stephanie feel safe, as she believed that someone from a wealthy family like hers could not be dangerous. They talked at the poker table late into the night. Stephanie was an experienced gambler, knowing how to assess odds and calculate how to win money. Just a few days earlier, she had won $10 in a game after hours of chatting. They had consumed a considerable amount of alcohol. What started as a casual conversation gradually turned into flirting. Eventually, Joran invited Stephanie to spend the night with him, and to her surprise, she agreed. They went to a hotel in the Miraflores area, where Joran rented a room. There are differing accounts of whether the pair became intimate. Some say they had an intimate encounter, while others claim that Stephanie simply went to his room to continue playing online poker. The details of that night are somewhat unclear, however. It is confirmed that at some point, Stephanie accessed Joran's laptop. Stephanie later learned of Joran's connection to Natalie Holloway's death. She had been lured into a dangerous situation, and now she was trapped with a criminal. Stephanie tried to escape, but was unable to. When Joran realized she had discovered his secret, he became furious. A struggle ensued. He hit Stephanie in the nose with a crowbar, causing her to bleed mercilessly. Joran overpowered her and began strangling her. He then continued to attack her until she stopped breathing. When morning came, Stephanie still hadn't returned home. Her father, Ricardo, grew increasingly worried as time passed. He knew his daughter always came home, which made him fear that something was wrong. He contacted his son, Enrique, for help in finding Stephanie. They called Stephanie's co-workers, but when they found nothing, they contacted the police to report her missing. Ricardo discovered that his daughter had been gambling the night before. Peruvian police then went to Atlantic City to investigate further. There, they reviewed surveillance camera footage of Stephanie playing poker and drinking. During the night, she met a tall young man. The police quickly identified him and obtained his national identification number. From that point on, Joran van der Sloot became the prime suspect in Stephanie's disappearance. It was discovered that the two had left the casino together around 5 a.m. that morning, although their exact destination was initially unclear. It was noted that they were returning to the hotel where Joran was staying. The footage showed the pair entering his hotel room. Hours later, Joran left the room alone, but returned with 2 cups of coffee and a loaf of bread. 3 hours after they entered, Joran left the room again, still alone. As he left, he informed a hotel employee that Stephanie was still in the room, but asked that she not be disturbed as she was only sleeping. On June 2, 3 days after Stephanie's death, and after Joran had checked out, A hotel employee discovered her body in room 309. Police found a tennis racket in the room, believed to be the weapon used in the attack. After verifying the name associated with the room, police confirmed that it was Joran van der Sloot. After leaving the hotel, he left the TV on full volume, possibly creating the illusion that someone was still inside. Police were unable to determine where he went after the crime. In an effort to quickly identify Joran, the police released his information and photo to all media outlets. In further investigation, police learned that Joran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, into a wealthy family. He has two older brothers, his mother is an art teacher, and his father has a well-paying job that provides for the family. They live a comfortable life. Enjoying traveling, Joran attends a local international school, where he is a diligent student. He is tall, attractive, and athletic, participating in football and tennis while regularly practicing with his father. Despite doing well in school, Joran was a spoiled brat and a habitual liar. In contrast to his calm older brothers, he displayed arrogant and flamboyant behavior, often sneaking out at night to go to casinos. In 2005, he met an American girl named Natalie Holloway. As their relationship developed, Joran expressed a desire to be intimate with her. When Natalie refused, he became violent and kicked her in the head when she was unconscious. He abused her to cover up his crime. He murdered her. The case of Natalie's disappearance and Joran's involvement attracted international media attention. Maintaining public interest for a decade, Joran was the prime suspect from the beginning. But due to numerous legal issues, he could not be convicted despite repeated interrogations and detentions. How did Joran get to Lima? And where did he get the money for the trip? In fact, he blackmailed Natalie's family, promising to reveal the location of their daughter's body in exchange for cash. After receiving a portion of the money, Joran fled to Lima to pursue his gambling ventures there. At a casino in Atlantic City, he met his second victim, Stephanie, whom he killed on the 5th anniversary of Natalie's death. Joran became the prime suspect in the case, leading to his placement on Interpol's wanted list. Police in neighboring countries were informed of the situation. His whereabouts were soon traced when he entered Chile via the Chacaluta border. Police confirmed that he was in Chile. After tracing him, he was later found after taking a taxi in Vina del Mar, a coastal city. Chilean police arrested him as he was walking toward Santiago. Joran was immediately taken into custody, and the bloodied clothing of the victim, Stephanie, was found in his possession. Initially, Joran denied any involvement in her death, claiming that armed robbers had attacked them in their hotel room. He alleged that when Stephanie refused to cooperate, they killed her. This explanation was seen as an attempt to evade responsibility. On July 5, after Joran was deported to Peru, an official investigation began. He was questioned, and after several days of police interrogation, he realized he had no way out and confessed to the crime. In his written statement, he detailed the events that took place that night. He claimed that he had left the hotel to buy coffee and bread, but when he returned, he discovered that Stephanie was using his computer and that she knew he was involved in Natalie's death. According to Joran, when he tried to explain with Stephanie, she hit him and ran toward the door. He then stopped her. He insisted that he never intended to kill her. However, when she invaded his privacy without permission, he became angry, lost control, and ultimately took Stephanie's life. Joran claimed that he drank coffee laced with an illegal pill, then packed his things and left the hotel. Subsequent toxicology tests showed no trace of any pills in his system, suggesting that he may have used this strategy to reduce his sentence in Peru. Crimes committed under the influence of illegal substances often result in lighter sentences, and it appears that Joran's attorneys were aware of this and sought to exploit it. Joran was subsequently arrested on charges of robbery and first-degree murder. Given the severity of Joran's actions and the wealth of his family, The judge denied his request for bail on the morning of the trial. An angry crowd gathered outside the courthouse, expressing their outrage by throwing fruit and eggs at Joran as he was escorted inside. Joran had previously been held in a maximum security prison in South America, known for its harsh conditions. Where he was constantly monitored, he was offered a chance to be transferred to a prison in Aruba if he revealed the location of Natalie's body. But he refused the offer. Joran's attorneys have argued that Joran lost control during the attack on Stephanie because she took his laptop without permission. If the judge had accepted this argument, Joran could have faced a lighter sentence of only 3 to 5 years in prison, and with good behavior, he might have been released after 20 months. However, these efforts have failed. On January 11, 2012, Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to the murder and robbery of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison and ordered to pay $75 to Stephanie's family. This marked the end of Stephanie's case. However, Joran's criminal story is not over yet. He was recently extradited to the United States to face charges of extorting Natalie's parents. Concerned that his sentence could be longer than life, he decided to plead guilty. Natalie Holloway's case took a turn when Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to extortion and wire fraud. The plea added 20 years to his sentence, which he would have to serve after his release from a Peruvian prison. Although Joran confessed to killing Natalie, he was not punished for that crime. Instead, he was sentenced to a total of 28 years in a Peruvian prison. After serving his sentence, he was transferred to a U.S. prison to serve an additional 20 years for extorting Natalie's family. During this time, little was known about what happened. Notably, Joran's father, who had supported him, died of a heart attack. Although Joran faced a total of 48 years in prison, many felt that this punishment was insufficient given his cruelty. Stephanie and Natalie lived short but vibrant lives, filled with love and the promise of a bright future. Their families and friends are devastated by the loss of their beautiful daughters, sisters, and girlfriends. It is heartbreaking to know that their lives were taken by a criminal with no compassion. If Joran had been incarcerated sooner, with enough evidence against him, Stephanie might still be alive today. Hello again, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Michael Weiss. Jake Nolan was born in New York, USA, as the youngest child in his family, with an older brother and an older sister. The family lived on Long Island and was relatively wealthy. Jake was known for being kind and respectful to everyone. However, at the age of 5, he was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. This condition affected him throughout his life, becoming more evident at the age of 15 when he began to experience mood swings. Despite facing many challenges, Jake had some positive moments in high school, including being recognized for winning a competition. However, this was also when he was diagnosed with anxiety and depression at the age of 17. Jake was hospitalized after a disturbing incident involving his parents after an argument. He threatened to commit end life with a kitchen knife. During this time, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a serious condition. His parents tried to help him manage his health problems and regularly consulted specialists, but their efforts were not very successful. Jake was prescribed about 30 different medications. This alone led to serious side effects, often leaving him feeling worse than before. Many of the medications interacted negatively with each other, resulting in poor treatment outcomes during this time. Jake also began drinking and using drugs. When Jake started college, his parents hoped he would improve. At first, everything seemed fine, but then they received a worried call from the school. The dean wanted to know why Jake had been absent for the past 2 weeks. That's when his parents discovered that he had been in bed most of the time. His depression worsened, and he began using illegal drugs regularly. This alarmed his family, who wanted to help him. But even at 19, Jake showed no interest in studying or working. Instead, he spent all his time having fun and avoiding responsibility. One day, Jake's mother spoke to her niece, Pamela Buckbinder, a successful psychiatrist in New York by her 40s. Pamela had won numerous awards and occasionally published articles in popular magazines. Concerned about Jake, Pamela offered to take him into her home for a while and set up a makeshift rehab facility there. She promised to organize therapy sessions for Jake and monitor his medication instead of charging him for her help. Pamela asked Jake to assist her in caring for her 4-year-old son during the summer due to their family ties. They agreed to her plan. Pamela and Jake are cousins, and she saw this as an opportunity to strengthen their family bond while helping to care for her son. When Jake's mother shared this with him, he viewed it as a break from his family and agreed to stay with Pamela for a few months, during which he would help care for her son. Pamela's husband is another prominent psychiatrist, Michael Weiss. Pamela and Michael had a rocky relationship. They often argued and got into physical fights. In one incident, Pamela was arrested for throwing a glass at Michael, causing a head injury that required stitches. Pamela argued that they were both equally at fault, as Michael was also arrested after another altercation and was accused of threatening her. Pamela and Michael ended their relationship in 2009, after which Pamela moved to Greenwich Village in Manhattan in 2011. They began a custody battle during this time. Pamela often spoke ill of Michael to their son, portraying him as a bad father. She also spread false and damaging stories about him to others, apparently trying to turn the child and others against him. This behavior was primarily intended to gain an advantage in the custody dispute and secure a substantial child support payment. By 2012, the couple finally reached an agreement that allowed Michael to spend weekends with their children. However, an unusual condition imposed by Pamela was that Michael purchase a life insurance policy on himself, naming their son Calder as the beneficiary, with Pamela as the trustee. Eventually, Michael, exhausted from the legal battle, reluctantly agreed to this questionable request. The custody battle reached its final stages after Jake moved into Pamela's home. Jake began sharing his thoughts and struggles with Pamela, who gave him advice, monitored his medications, and made his life much easier. Jake became the godfather to Pamela's son Calder, and often said that the experience gave his life meaning. On November 12, 2012, Michael spent the day with his son, Calder, for the first time. He felt excited because he had reached an agreement with Pamela about custody, allowing him to interact with Calder without stress. Michael's schedule that morning was to take Calder to kindergarten and then go to work. In the afternoon, Calder would return home to his mother, while Michael was attending a therapy session with a patient. Jake appeared at the door with a worried look on his face and carrying a large bag. Michael realized that Jake knew he had moved in with Pamela and was dealing with some mental health issues. However, Michael was unsure about the current situation because he was with a patient. He asked Jake to wait outside until he finished. When the therapy session ended, Michael found Jake still waiting in the hallway. Dr. Michael asked him about the large bag. Jake claimed that it contained important documents for Calder's kindergarten that he had helped Pamela prepare. However, Michael was skeptical about this explanation. Michael asked Jake to leave the bag outside because he was worried that Jake might plant a listening device there. However, Jake insisted he couldn't leave the bag behind as it could be stolen. Eventually, Michael relented and allowed Jake to bring the bag inside with him upon entering the office. Jake asked to use the restroom first. Later, he attacked Michael with a sledgehammer. Fortunately, Michael avoided a fatal blow to the head, but Jake struck him in the shoulder. Jake then lost his balance because the sledgehammer was too heavy, dropped it, and pulled out a knife to attack Michael. Michael fought back, pushed Jake away, tried to run into the hallway, and called for help. People gathered in the hallway and shortly after, Michael passed out from blood loss. Witnesses called the police and paramedics. Jake, however, didn't attempt to flee. Instead, he sat in the hallway and took pictures. When the paramedics arrived, they found Michael unconscious and Jake sitting beside him. Jake told the paramedics that Michael had attacked him first. Meanwhile, both Michael and Jake were taken to the hospital, where they were placed under police supervision. Forensic experts retrieved the sledgehammer and knife from Michael's office. Upon examination, they found a DNA sample on the handle of the sledgehammer that matched Jake's. The knife was also analyzed and determined to have come from Pamela's kitchen, inside a large bag belonging to Jake. The police found a pack of cigarettes, zip ties, and a hand-drawn map of the building where Michael worked, showing multiple entrances and exits. The police traced the bag to a purchase near Pamela's home. They reviewed surveillance footage from a nearby hardware store and observed that Jake had bought the sledgehammer used in the attack, along with zip ties and a bag. The night before, Pamela was seen next to him, paying cash for the items, possibly aware of the planned crime. Although Michael suffered multiple injuries, none were life-threatening. Jake was taken to the hospital but was released on $200 bail while awaiting a hearing on the attempted murder charge. He is allowed to stay with his parents in Miami. Jake spoke to the police and claimed that the attack was self-defense, stating that Michael had taken Jake's sledgehammer and tried to injure himself. When Jake realized that his lie was not convincing, he decided to tell the police the truth about what had happened. He accused Pamela of being the real mastermind, claiming that she had manipulated him and turned him against Michael. Pamela then provided the police with Jake's medical history, which indicated that he had suffered from a number of serious mental health issues. The police investigated Jake's testimony, and evidence supporting his claim quickly emerged. Pamela had an ulterior motive to harm her ex-husband. In November 2013, Michael Weiss filed a lawsuit against Pamela, alleging that his ex-wife pressured him into taking out $1 million life insurance policy. He pointed out that the attack occurred just 4 days after the contract was issued, which raised suspicions. Michael believed that this was a planned plot to benefit Pamela financially. Additionally, Jake's attorney secured a restraining order against Pamela, arguing that it was necessary to protect Jake's mental health from her influence. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Pamela, she was not arrested or questioned, and her medical license remained intact. Meanwhile, the investigation continued, and an expert was brought in to analyze the building blueprints found in Jake's bag. It was revealed that Pamela had drawn the blueprints, but she claimed that the maps were for Jake to find Michael and pick up Calder if necessary. Pamela was in regular contact with Jake before and after the attempted assassination. Their text messages showed that she was aware of his whereabouts and what was going on. After Jake sent a selfie to Michael following the attempted assassination, they had a long conversation that revealed the plan had failed. Jake expressed guilt for not being able to kill Michael during this time. Jake fully admitted his actions and showed a willingness to accept the consequences, no matter how severe they might be. He told detectives that Pamela had convinced him to kill Michael to free her from an abusive relationship that was harming both her and her young son at the time. Jake was so close to the boy that he wanted to help his relatives get rid of Michael. He did not know that Michael's life was insured for a significant amount of money and that Pamela could benefit from the insurance payout. Jake did not care about the money because his family supported him. However, Pamela manipulated him to the point that he was willing to do anything for her. Unfortunately, the case did not progress. Even after 2 years, the situation remained unchanged. As of 2015, Pamela was still living comfortably at home with her son, sharing custody with Michael, as there was no evidence to prove her involvement in the attempted murder. Meanwhile, Jake is in Miami, receiving comprehensive care and his condition begins to improve as he starts to regain his sanity. Jake realizes that he has become a pawn in Pamela's scheme. Devoted to caring for her child and managing household responsibilities, he understands that Pamela never intended to help him. Instead, she aimed to use him for her own dubious purposes. Jake has overcome his harmful habits and envisions a future where he can start a family and raise children. However, he faces the serious possibility of being imprisoned for years due to the betrayal of someone he once trusted. Additionally, questions begin to arise regarding the nature of Jake's relationship with Pamela, which seems to extend beyond simple family support and therapeutic assistance. Their interactions resemble typical affectionate exchanges between newlyweds, and a photo of them together in bed has surfaced. It appears that Pamela is pursuing Jake with the intent of deepening their relationship. Possibly to manipulate him, Pamela recounted a fabricated story of having endured physical violence throughout her marriage. She eventually accused Michael of trying to gain custody of their son. Over time, Jake grew to believe her, insisting that he would do anything for Pamela. She convinced him that in order to survive, he needed to eliminate Michael. It was clear that Pamela was not strong enough to confront a robust adult man, making Jake a suitable candidate for her dangerous scheme. The trial began in March 2016, where the jury was presented with a detailed account of the events that took place on November 12, 2012. Jake recalled Pamela waking him up that morning, insisting that it was time to put their plan into action. She showered him with compliments, calling him her savior after breakfast. She continued her manipulations. On November 11, they purchased a sledgehammer, zip ties, and a bag in preparation for their plan. The details of the plot were far more sinister than the events that transpired in Michael's office initially. Jake was supposed to attack Michael and torture him before he died. Pamela wanted Michael to suffer for as long as possible. Jake then went to Michael's office, entering through the service entrance, where security cameras recorded his arrival. Remarkably, he made no attempt to conceal his identity. With confidence, he walked down the hallway and approached Michael's office. At the time, Michael was examining a patient, forcing Jake to step back and wait outside. Jake was in the hallway. Rethinking his actions, he soon realized that if he backed out now, he wouldn't be able to face Pamela. There was no turning back. So he carried out the attack while awaiting trial. Jake undergoes evaluations from several psychiatrists, who noted that he was fully aware of his actions. Concluding that his decision to kill Michael was intentional, the jury deliberated and found Jake Nolan guilty of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison, while Pamela remained free on bail. This changed on October 19, 2017, when the police attempted to arrest Pamela and urged her to turn herself in, but she ignored their requests. When the search began, she could not be found at any known address and did not answer her cell phone or work phone. An anonymous source eventually informed the police of Pamela's whereabouts, and she was arrested at a friend's home. Pamela was charged with second-degree intentional homicide and first-degree assault. On September 7, 2022, Pamela Buchbinder admitted guilty to these charges to avoid a 25-year sentence. However, on October 11 of that year, she attempted to withdraw her guilty plea, claiming that she had been under the influence of illegal drugs and had been assaulted by security guards. Her request to withdraw her guilty plea was denied. Ultimately, Pamela was sentenced to 11 years in prison, and her medical license was officially revoked. Jake felt deep remorse for his actions. His parents firmly believed in his innocence and were convinced that Pamela was responsible for his condition. Jake's parents stated that sending Jake to Pamela's home for treatment was the worst decision they ever made. Pamela, however, continued to maintain her innocence. The child's father, Michael, was granted custody. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sherry Daly. Sherry Daly grew up in Ventura, California, in a loving and supportive family, known for her friendly attitude and positive outlook. She quickly became one of the most popular girls in school. In her senior year, she began dating Michael Daly, who was admired by many. Their relationship developed quickly, and the couple even decided to get married after graduation. Despite their many positive qualities, Michael was outgoing and sociable, while Sherry was an introverted and reserved young woman who displayed a calm demeanor. In contrast to her boyfriend's lively personality, Michael's personality did not fit in with Sherry's family. However, despite their obvious differences, the couple found a harmonious balance in their relationship. Sherry became more outgoing in social situations, while Michael adopted a calmer approach. Initially, their relationship faced significant opposition from their families, but Sherry was determined to pursue it, and her parents eventually relented. Their doubts were dispelled. When Sherry and Michael introduced each other to their families, Michael gradually won over Sherry's relatives. And seeing Sherry's joy reassured her parents of his good intentions, he showed his charm and made a positive impression. Appearing both intelligent and trustworthy, Michael's serious demeanor charmed Sherry, and her family supported her choice. After graduating from high school, the young couple started their lives together, both working at a local grocery store. However, for Sherry, this was not her ultimate aspiration. She dreamed of saving enough money to open a daycare at home, a goal that aligned with her interest in children. The couple married in 1982 when Sherry was 21, and by the age of 24, she had welcomed 2 sons. Just a year apart, motherhood brought her joy, and her daily routine revolved around taking her sons to school and daycare. Sherry not only took her sons to school, but also cared for several children in the neighborhood, further expanding her nurturing role. Gradually, she was able to quit her grocery store job and devote herself to childcare full-time. This allowed her to fulfill one of her long-cherished dreams of caring for children in her own home. To accommodate her growing responsibilities, she purchased a van, affectionately known to her friends as the local school bus. It seemed like the family had everything they could wish for, and there were no signs of challenges to come. On May 6, 1996, Sherry was scheduled, as usual, to pick up the students and take them home. When her husband returned home, he began receiving calls from worried parents inquiring about Sherry's absence. They were confused, as she had not arrived to pick up the children after school. Michael soon received a call from the school, confirming that his 2 sons had not been picked up either. Prompted by the situation, Michael went to the school, where he learned that Sherry had only been there that morning. Concerned for her safety, he suspected that she might have been in an accident or had encountered some kind of emergency. He began contacting local hospitals, but there were no reports of injuries matching her description. Feeling the urgency of the situation, he then contacted Sherry's parents, who lived about 120 kilometers away. They also had no idea where she was. Therefore, they decided to notify the police and report Sherry missing. The officers went to the couple's home to conduct a routine investigation and quickly realized that something was wrong. They decided to interview the neighbors, but no one had seen Sherry since she had dropped her children off at school that morning. Sherry usually went to the store around 10 a.m. to do her shopping and then returned home to do her chores. However, on May 6th, this routine was interrupted. She did not return by noon. Concerns prompted them to check the route Sherry would typically take, which led the police to the parking lot where she usually parked. There, they discovered her truck, apparently abandoned in a hurry. With the keys still in the ignition, Sherry's identification was found attached to her keychain, and the Mother's Day gifts she had purchased were scattered across the floor of the car. The doors were unlocked, and there was no sign of Sherry inside. The police later attempted to contact Michael, but he was not home, which they found unusual given the circumstances. Sherry was missing. Yet Michael did not seem anxious to hear from her. Furthermore, they learned that Michael had begun selling items that belonged to Sherry, suggesting that he was not expecting her to return. The police reviewed security footage from both the outdoor parking lot and inside the store. The recordings confirmed that Sherry had gone shopping that morning. Consistent with her usual routine, there was no indication that she was in distress. She was not followed around the store, and no suspicious individuals were seen in the footage. It was evident that something went wrong after she loaded her groceries into her truck. Unfortunately, security cameras did not capture any footage of the parking lot after she approached her car at 9:22 a.m. as the officers discussed the events in the parking lot. A passerby overheard their conversation and approached them. She reported that she had seen a turquoise sedan pull up near Sherry's car earlier that morning. A blonde woman, wearing a brown suit and sunglasses, exited the vehicle after a brief conversation with this woman. The witness saw Sherry being handcuffed and taken away in an unknown direction. The woman who arrested her did not appear to be a police officer, and the vehicle's appearance was unusual. It is difficult to determine the circumstances of her encounter with an apparent plainclothes officer. Police quickly became concerned, noting that it was unusual for police to operate in the city without a marked vehicle or uniform while making an arrest. The entire situation raised alarm bells. One officer, who happened to have attended high school with Sherry, stated that he knew both Sherry and her husband Michael well, and asserted that Sherry did not seem like the type of person who would be so serious as to be handcuffed and taken away, especially since the young couple had no prior legal issues. The witness provided a valuable clue. The police quickly searched the databases of all police stations, hoping to find relevant information regarding Sherry's case. However, they found no such records, indicating that this was not an arrest but a kidnapping. The police initially focused their attention on Michael, but then he provided a credible alibi at the time of the kidnapping. He was working at a grocery store, and several employees confirmed that he was on duty. In addition, security footage was reviewed to further verify his whereabouts. During the initial stages of the interrogation, Michael revealed that he had been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Diana. Surprisingly, he mentioned that he did not know her last name. Michael also did not know her address, but the police were able to obtain a phone number associated with Diana at that time, when cell phones were not yet common. Michael provided his home phone number as a result. He was released after investigating the address associated with the phone number. The police discovered that Diana's full name was Diana Hahn. The address was verified in their database, prompting the police to plan a visit to her home. The police arrived at the house and knocked on the door, although they heard noises from inside. No one answered at first. After a while of waiting, Michael opened the door. Standing behind him was Diana. Michael's attitude aroused suspicion. He appeared indifferent to his wife's disappearance and seemed more concerned about his mistress. The police decided to take both of them to the station for questioning, as they suspected that the situation might be related to a love triangle. It is believed that Sherry may have discovered Michael's affair, which could have led to conflict, either between the couple or involving Diana. Diana had become an integral part of Michael's life. He brought his sons to her home on numerous occasions, allowing them to spend time together as a family. Witnesses stated that Sherry had known about the situation long before her disappearance and had frequent conflicts with both Michael and Diana. Many witnesses confirmed the hostility between Diana and Sherry. Despite this tension, Michael appeared indifferent, which exacerbated the rivalry between the two women. Sherry viewed Diana as a homewrecker and was determined to protect her marriage. She steadfastly refused to consider divorce, believing that their problems were merely a temporary crisis that would eventually resolve itself through discussions with Diana and Michael, as well as their relatives. It became clear that Sherry's family had been facing significant challenges for a long time. Observations of Michael's behavior indicated that he treated Sherry more like a servant than a partner. She would wake up at 2 a.m. to prepare meals for him, and even prepared hot water for him, ensuring he could enjoy a hot bath when he woke up. Sherry complied with many of his requests, but Michael constantly found reasons to criticize her. Sherry's family members knew that Michael was unhappy with Sherry's appearance after giving birth. She dedicated a lot of time and effort to getting back in shape, dieting, exercising, and experimenting with her hairstyles and makeup, all in an attempt to please him. Unfortunately, her efforts never seemed to be enough. As he often insulted her and blamed her, the family dynamic worsened when Michael was transferred to a store in Santa Barbara. His new work schedule, which included night shifts and daytime sleep, added to their stress. After a while, Michael was transferred back, where he met his lover, Diana. They discovered that they had a lot in common, leading to the rapid development of their romantic relationship. Both of their mothers were from Japan, and their fathers had served in the United States Army. Their colleagues knew about the relationship and generally had a negative view of Diana. Her mysterious nature and stern demeanor scared many people. In the months before Sherry's disappearance, Michael often told his wife about a friend named Alex. He said that Alex was struggling after a breakup and that he was being supportive, including visiting Alex overnight. However, the frequent calls to their home were not from Alex, but from Diana, who disguised her voice to sound like a man. It was clear that Michael made no effort to hide his relationship. In fact, he seemed to flaunt it, which easily hurt Sherry and made her worry about his feelings for her. A neighbor recalled that last Christmas, Sherry came to his house in tears. She was alone, knowing that Michael had taken their sons to spend the holidays with Diana, feeling betrayed. Sherry sought comfort from her neighbor. Despite her pain, she had not yet considered divorce. She still hoped to save their relationship and believed she could work things out. However, as her mother later recounted, Sherry had decided to leave Michael and take the children before she went missing. She had no intention of seeking child support, believing she could handle her challenges on her own. The interrogation of Michael and Diana ended with a crucial question. Where was Diana the day Sherry went missing? She claimed to have taken the day off work to go for a long bike ride outside the city. However, her alibi appeared to be weak, as there was no testimony or video evidence to corroborate her story. A call to the police station from a co-worker at Michael's grocery store raised further concerns. The co-worker noted that Diana was an hour late for her shift the day after Sherry went missing. During questioning, Diana had several scratches on her forehead, and her hair almost covered her face. When asked to push her hair aside, it became clear that she was hiding several scratches, which she claimed were from a bicycle accident. However, these looked more like fingernail scratches than the usual injuries from a fall. When the police asked to see her palms, elbows, and knees, areas that are often injured in bicycle accidents, Diana's skin showed no scratches, suggesting that her claim of having fallen off a bicycle was a lie. Despite these contradictions, she stuck to her story. Michael's behavior was equally disturbing. He showed no concern about his wife's disappearance. He did not participate in search efforts and did not attempt to join any groups. He explained that he needed to care for their children during this difficult time. However, this excuse did not seem sincere, especially when he tried to spend time with his mistress, Diana. While leaving the children with his parents, the police are working to gather evidence to charge the suspects. Previously, a witness mentioned that the undercover cop was driving a turquoise car, but she could not remember the license plate number. The police believe that the perpetrators were unlikely to have used their own vehicles and suspect that the car the perpetrator was driving was rented. Therefore, they decided to check local car rental companies. Their investigation revealed that a turquoise Nissan Altima had indeed been rented on the day of Sherry's incident. The police aimed to impound the car for inspection, but it was at a car wash, although the rental company did not require a thorough cleaning of the interior after each return. The Nissan was in worse condition than usual. Employees reported that the interior was in disarray. The back seat was stained, and the side mirrors were torn. At the direction of management, the car was sent for cleaning. After the car was returned, the police inspected the interior. Surprisingly, much of the evidence remained intact, despite the cleaning. When they lifted the rear carpet, they discovered a large stain underneath that looked like dried blood. Consequently, the decision was made to seize the car for forensic examination. During the inspection, bloodstains were found in the trunk and on the seats when they cut the upholstery. The foam material of the rear seats was soaked with evidence, and the bloodstains in the car were sent for analysis. The results later confirmed that the blood belonged to Sherry. Additionally, it was determined that Diana was the person who rented the car. Therefore, the police decided to interrogate Diana again. During this interview, Diana maintained her innocence, sticking to her previously fabricated story during the search. The police found a handbag belonging to Diana, which contained a remarkable photograph. This photo was a professional studio picture of Sherry's family, capturing a family gathering with their children. However, two important details stood out. Diana appeared in the photo next to Sherry. As the police unraveled the complexities of the family's relationships, they began to uncover Diana's many intrigues. In Diana's handbag, a piece of paper was found with Sherry's name and her bank account number. Further investigation revealed that Diana had studied and practiced witchcraft. Diana had confided to a colleague about her intention to sacrifice someone on Michael's birthday, which raised significant concerns. Michael's birthday was only a few days after Sherry's murder, making these developments even more suspicious. In this context, Diana expressed a desire to speak to Michael. In response, the police organized a discreet meeting. They agreed to let Michael into the interrogation room. Their conversation was being recorded, and they did not seem to know it. They spoke in a very relaxed manner. The police could clearly hear their discussion, which provided valuable insights into the case. Diana expressed her frustration with Michael, accusing him of putting her in a dangerous situation that could have led to her arrest. She repeatedly questioned him about why he had placed her in these circumstances. The couple was clearly looking for a way out of this complicated situation and was trying to find a means to avoid punishment. Michael then made vague statements and urged Diana to tell the truth to the police, stressing that she had nothing to worry about. They attempted to stage a misleading conversation to distract the police. They had no idea that important information had reached police. Michael was then escorted out of the interrogation room, and the discussion continued with Diana, who was pressed to explain her possession of a piece of paper with the bank account number. In her defense, Diana claimed that Sherry had abandoned the children and that the account was necessary to purchase necessities for them. However, her explanation lacked credibility. The police believed that Diana was lying. After investigations, they learned that Sherry was a good woman. Many of her acquaintances described her as a loving mother to her children, and there was no sign of her mistreating them. It was clear that she was trusted to look after the children of her neighbors and other households, which reinforced the belief that she would not abandon her own children. Despite this, Diana continued to try to portray Sherry in a negative light. The police realized that Diana was involved in Sherry's case, but they felt they did not have enough evidence to arrest her or file charges. Therefore, they allowed her to go home while the investigation continued. The case was widely reported in the media, raising concerns that journalists could play a key role in assisting criminal investigations or obstructing the pursuit of justice. Sherry's disappearance was a popular topic on all news platforms, including newspapers, radio, and television. Her photos were displayed prominently throughout the city, prompting widespread public discussion. The police received numerous calls with tips related to the case. However, many of them were unfounded. Despite this, they focused on identifying credible leads based on the evidence they had. The police decided to share information with the public about a possible connection to someone named Diana as soon as her photo was aired. Calls to the station increased significantly. One notable tip came from a woman working at a local wig shop who recalled that Diana had purchased a chestnut wig a few weeks earlier. Diana made it clear that she intended to look like a police officer to intimidate someone. Further investigation revealed that she had paid for the wig with a check made out to Sherry. Signed in distinctive blue ink, a salesperson from another store contacted the police to report that Diana had visited his establishment around the same time. During this visit, Diana purchased handcuffs and a police badge, which she paid for with a personal check. Additionally, a hardware store employee provided a third report, stating that approximately a week before Sherry was abducted, Diana had also visited the store and purchased an axe. She drew attention with her striking makeup, which was particularly bold and set her apart from the others. Although the guest wished to remain anonymous, she paid with a check in her own name, establishing a direct link to the potential crime. The police collected physical evidence and later discovered an axe at Diana's residence, which was sent for forensic testing. Surprisingly, tests found no trace of Diana's blood. Suggesting the axe was not used in the murder, the police determined that Diana had carefully planned Sherry's abduction the day before. She had purchased a brown suit, shoes, superglue, large garbage bags, toiletries, lighter fluid, matches, sunglasses, and other items that could have been instrumental in the abduction. As a result, the police were able to piece together a possible timeline of the events surrounding the abduction. Sherry may not have recognized Diana when she wore the wig and glasses, which could explain why she did not resist during the arrest. However, when they were close together and Sherry got into the rental car, it was clear that she recognized Diana sitting in the back seat. Sherry attempted to escape by screaming and doing her best to block Diana from driving away. During her resistance, Sherry scratched Diana's forehead based on the blood found in the car. It is possible that Sherry was killed shortly afterward in the back seat. Diana was eventually arrested, and it was discovered that she was in possession of a pen containing the same blue ink that was involved in the case. Attention then turned to Michael, as he seemed to have been aware of his mistress Diana's plans, given his suspicious behavior at a press conference. There were indications that he might have been the instigator of the crime. The police suggested that Sherry's husband, Michael, be investigated for possible involvement in the murder. Following this revelation, the police department received numerous calls from drug dealers and people in the escort service industry, all reporting that Michael regularly used drugs and hired escorts. One escort revealed that on the day Sherry went missing, she had met Michael, who had taken her out of town. This information attracted the attention of the police as the investigation progressed. On June 1, 1996, near Kaduna Larga Road, on the edge of a cliff, police discovered women's shoes and sunglasses belonging to Diana. Shortly thereafter, they found the body of a woman. Dental records confirmed that the body belonged to Sherry, who had gone missing. Forensic examinations revealed that Sherry had been stabbed about a dozen times, mostly in the neck and upper chest. A forensic expert determined that a serrated knife was the murder weapon, with multiple stab wounds to Sherry's body indicating a violent and deliberate attack. particularly to the face. This evidence suggested a personal grudge against Sherry after the murder. Sherry's body was dumped outside the city. Worryingly, Michael had been socializing with an escort just meters from where Sherry's body was found. Suggesting his possible involvement in the crime, the police gathered enough evidence to charge Michael. Further investigations revealed that Diana had lured Sherry into her car before killing her. Notably, hair from Diana's wig was found on Sherry, and the wig was later recovered. Diana's trial was initially held. With her facing charges of kidnapping and murder, the attorney took a fairly passive approach to defending his client, focusing primarily on minimizing the severity of the sentence by arguing that the murder was not intentional. However, the evidence presented clearly demonstrated that Diana had meticulously planned the attack. After brief deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Diana Hahn was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the hearing, Diana testified against Michael, claiming that he had urged her to kill Sherry. However, Diana's testimony was not the most crucial factor in the prosecution's success. Just before the hearing began, another woman came forward to the police, revealing that she had been in a relationship with Michael shortly before the murder. She stated that he had also urged her to kill his wife, Sherry. According to her account, Michael not only sought to kill his wife, but also requested that it be done in the cruelest way possible. Wishing for Sherry to suffer for a long time before dying, this woman considered his request a joke and refused to comply. The woman then decided to end her relationship with Michael, who was behaving in a troubled manner. After discovering the tragic events that had occurred, she contacted the police. The prosecution presented evidence that Michael's motive for the murder was a desire to avoid a prolonged divorce and custody battle, as well as to secure the financial benefit of Sherry's life insurance policy, from which he had received $50. Meanwhile, Michael's attorney presented a defense, largely arguing that Michael was a victim of circumstances due to Sherry's refusal to file for divorce. Ultimately, Michael Daly was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After Sherry's death, custody of her children was awarded to their grandparents.